This call is now being recorded.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is your boy, Jay Mace, and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Album Cover, where I talk music with some people who have made an impact within the music industry. And right now on the phone with me, I have Mr. Shawn Rivera, member of the 90s R&B group As Yet. Shawn, welcome to the podcast, my man.
Man, it's great to be here, Jarrell. What's going on? Just in case you may have forgotten which one, I'm the guy that everybody referred to as the high yellow one, the light-skinned one, the one who sings, I drank your wine as you taste mine. That guy. Anyway.
The Christopher Williams type. Yeah, we know what that is. I appreciate you coming out and being on the podcast with me. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. Where did your love of singing come from?
Well, unlike most of my friends, I didn't really get into the music until I was in my junior year of high school. I used to be afraid to get in front of people and read. I was a really good student, but I didn't like reading in front of the class. So I got scared, and I don't like being scared because where I come from, you know, I hear gunshots every day and madness going on in the street. And I'm like, I ain't scared of nothing. Why am I scared of being in front of people? So I came up with this idea. I said, you know what, I'm going to join gospel choir because I love the sound of the music. I'm just going to hide up there. You know, nobody will see me, but I get to be in front of people, and that'll help me get over my fear. About 2 weeks later, they asked me to sing a lead vocal, and a friend of mine from LaSalle University, which is next door, heard me singing that lead and said, hey, you want to be in a group? And I was like, wow, I don't think I was all that good, but, you know, you think I'm good enough to be in a group? Man, I love to be a part of something, you know, that makes me feel as good as music makes me feel. So I wasn't one of those like child prodigies who just grew up singing in the church, but I did start singing with gospel choir in high school, and it was more about getting over my fear. So that's a lesson to anybody that on the other side of what you fear most is what you want. So.
Now, growing up in, thank you. So now growing up in Philly, tell me about the impact and the influence of Philly soul, mainly Gamble and Huff, Sigma Sounds, and Philly International.
Wow. Well, starting with Philly International, I mean, there's a treasure trove of music coming from not just the most popular artists, let's say from the Patti LaBelle to the Teddy Pendergrass. I mean, you know better than most, Jarrell, how many obscure artists. I mean, like, I won't say obscure because in Philly, everybody knows everybody. So some artists that to you and me might be ordinary. Like, you know McFadden and Whitehead?
Oh, yes.
You know, yes. And them boys, the son that had Your Love is the 187.
And forget that was a G off Jason's lyric, Whitehead Brothers.
Yep, the Whitehead Brothers. Well, they're the son of, they're part of the Philly legacy that a lot of people don't appreciate, just as an example. But the influence that Philly had in general, it was at my era and coming up in the 90s, but the early 90s, because the R&B vocal groups of the 90s got started in the late 80s, most of the ones that weren't put together. So at that time, everybody was hanging out in the street corners. Everybody was singing. Like before Boyz II Men was famous, we knew them. Gamble and Huff, this is before they signed No Question. And one of the guys in No Question used to be in our group back in the day when we were As Yet Untitled. God rest in power to Mr. Damon Core. You know, Damon Core, he left our group and eventually signed to Philly International, and they put out that group No Question. I'm sure you might know the song, I'm Gonna Love You. That was the joint.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. But make a long story short, it was a sweet spot in music history where the thugs would be singing on the corner. It didn't matter. It was something to do, and like the people would be battling, like fist fighting over songs, and there were competitions like for everybody to hustle and try to win the prize money so we could eat, like
right.
One of the dudes in our group would sew the outfits, make the outfits for us because, it was like a style thing to do your own outfits and cut our own hair and then get on the stage, and we was trying to do all the acapella stuff. Like there was still camps, but you had camps that were influenced by either like the Jodeci's or the Boyz II Men type groups, the Take Sixes and the Commissions who gave birth to those groups. I'm going off on a tangent from Philly International.
Oh, no,
but
that's fine.
That Motown Philly thing was not an accident because Motown and Philadelphia both have a very similar background when it comes to musical legacies and in-house labels, like how, Philly International was, Philadelphia's answer to the Motown sound coming out of Detroit. So we had mad love and respect for them, just how like Philly hip-hop is parallel to New York hip-hop. It's unique and different, but we keep pace. We keep pace with everything that's going on out there.
Yeah, definitely. And the Philly soul sound at the time was so white hot. The Jacksons had to get on board once they left Motown to go to Epic to record the 1976 Jacksons album, the first album with Randy.
Man, man, I knew you were going to educate me today. Every time we talk, man, I learned something new. And a lot of things I was there for, a lot of things I was too busy to pay attention to. So, man,
right. And I try to do that, man. And for those of you that don't know, go to YouTube, look up my work. I don't play around. But the one thing about Philadelphia that I think that doesn't get enough credit for is all of the rich legacy and traditions, like you mentioned, of all the acts that came out of Philly, from Gamble and Huff, and of course everybody's favorite blue-eyed soul duo, Hall & Oates.
Oh yeah, man. People ain't hip. I mean, Hall & Oates is just one of them kind of groups where, just in my personal opinion, it doesn't matter what color they are. They just sound good, and I'm proud to have them in my catalog. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
good music is good music, no matter where it comes from.
Right, music is colorblind. Now, let's jump forward. What high school did you attend, and did you cross paths with anybody that went to the School of Performing Arts? That's the same school that Boyz II Men went to, and also Questlove from the Roots.
Oh, as a matter of fact, you mentioned two people who I not only have crossed paths with, but had the pleasure of either collaborating with and sharing spaces with, starting with Mark Nelson, who was the original member of Boyz II Men. Now, Creative and Performing Arts High School, they're known for Boyz II Men amongst other artists, but Boyz II Men is one of their more signature artists. Now, I went to Central High School, which was like the academia school. It's the college preparatory school, #1 academic school in the city. And at the time, it was #2 in the nation. But basically, it's where senators and mayors and all these politicians, lawyers, doctors, MIT, you name it, that kind of thing. And like I said, I got into music late. But once the bug bit me, I realized, man, I don't really want to take on these Ivy League scholarships. Like, I was going to be like a professor or a lawyer or whatever. Like, they were throwing all these opportunities at me, but it wasn't speaking to me like music was. So I had met Mike from Boyz II Men before I met Mark. And Mike was such a nice guy. This was before they got signed, but they were already like known of in the city. And he was just mad cool. It's a shame he got the scoliosis and he ain't, touring with the group anymore. But, he was the first person that I met who made me feel like, I feel safe and like respected around these people, because I'm out there in the leaning houses of Logan waiting for a bus in the middle of the night, and he's standing right there in the corner with me. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like a real dude, just making sure that
you're straight.
Yeah. And then Amir for Questlove, you mentioned him. He was actually in the same graduating class with Mark Nelson, who was again in our group after we got the record deal. So they go back. I've been, at Amir's house in Philly. I'll never forget, we had some kind of Memorial Day party, and he was giving out little bottles of limoncello, and we're like listening to music. And he's a very cerebral cat, but like down to earth and very approachable and cool like that. So hats off to him. And he deserves all the success that he gets.
Right.
I went to University of the Arts. I didn't go to a music high school. Shout out to University of the Arts, which is actually known for the likes of Stanley Clarke, who's another jazz legend, and the Petersons. They're more into composers, and like when you graduate high school, it takes a certain level to advance. When I got to University of the Arts, I thought I was going to be a music teacher. I was pretty much done with the performance side of things until the record deal came calling. And most people, they go to high school, they get out of high school, and they go and they fly to California or move to New York and try to get a deal. We got discovered, got discovered in Philly by California people. So we flew out there to sign the deal, not to find a deal.
Right. So was this back during the time where labels would send their A&R reps to different cities to try to scout and find acts?
Yep, they used to do those, like the Jack the Rapper type Johns. Or they would do
Jack the Rapper convention down in, I think it was Atlanta, right?
Yep, and then they have one that,
the BRE.
The BRE. There's another one that they used to do over the Wyndham Franklin Plaza. It's all these kind of like label shows.
Music convention.
IM convention. Yeah, the IM convention. That's the one. International African American Music convention where they would I remember you talked about Christopher Williams, Albie Sure and Christopher Williams. We sang for all of them, trying to get a record deal. Father MC, Andre Harrell, you name it, anybody who would listen. Tony Terry made us his opening act because he heard us at that convention here in Philly. But you go to all these places and you try to get the attention of people. And that's when labels used to develop artists. So they would get these budgets, these huge budgets, which don't exist anymore, to develop an artist. So they got so used to having to tell artists how to be, what to do, what to sing, how to dress, that the idea of working with somebody who knows what they're doing is like they don't know what to do with that. They're like, well, how are we going to justify spending all this money unless we redevelop you and make you into something, because we know best. We sell records all day, but they don't make records all day. That's a whole other story.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So now, once Boyz II Men exploded with Motown Philly and Cooley High Harmony in '91, which was mainly produced by another producer that I feel doesn't give enough credit what he's done, Mr. Dallas Austin, and when Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince exploded, did that kind of put the charge in the back of a lot of acts from Philly to say, hey, if these two acts can break out of Philly, we can do it too?
You know what? I regret to inform you that it had the opposite effect on most of the artists that I knew, because Philly is a very unique city. Great artists come from here, but not so many. Nobody comes here to make it. So what happens is we had a lot of groups that were our contemporaries during that time. And when Boyz II Men got signed, most of them would say, man, we're wasting our time now because they're never going to sign two acts from Philly back to back, like, because it took so long for one to break out. But as yet Untitled, we took it another way. We're like, we believe in our own talent and that we have a unique sound, that the world needs to hear. And we've come too far to give up because we'd been together for 6 years before we got our record deal. So a lot of acts fell off on the wayside, and, hats off to them, because there's a lot of more talented groups that, you know how it is. For every great act that becomes famous, there's 10 other acts that may be technically or sonically better, but just for whatever reason, politics and the business of music didn't, the chips didn't fall for them. So,
right. Yeah, so you were speaking about as you had been together for 6 years before you got your deal. Did you guys cut your teeth in the local talent show circuit, open mic night, hustle to try to be open act for any big tour that came into Philly?
Yes, and yes. But we also left Philly and we did the Apollo as amateurs in New York. We did the DC conventions, those IM conventions, and the Jack the Rappers in Atlanta. Like, we would drive down, fly down, cram ourselves. We didn't have no money, so we'd all chip in for gas and rent a cheap car or whatever, get where we had to go. But by the time we got our record deal, we were already known in Philly because, again, that talent show scene, like, was also sponsored by, like, Coors Light. They would do things every year, the Superfest, Budweiser and whatnot. And our thing, we got so good that when people saw that we were in the competition, they would drop out. They're like, why waste the entry fee? And I'm not even bragging. It's just how it was. Like, people said, man, why y'all have to be at this show? Because we trying to get seen. Y'all already. And then on the flip side, you had people saying, if you were going to make it, you'd have made it by now, So a lot of people didn't, after all that time, didn't care. They don't care how good you sound. They're like, if you were famous, we'd know you by now.
Right. So tell me.
It had the reverse effect.
Oh, yeah. So we're going to go back into Ash had the original lineup before Mark came in, but I want to go back into what we were talking about earlier with the impact of Philly and music culture. I feel that Philly hip hop doesn't really get enough credit outside of DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. You had Schoolie D come out of Philly, Steady B, 3 Times Dope. Pop Art record label doesn't really get enough credit. And then the great DJ Cash Money, 1988 winner of the DMC contest. Tell me about the impact of Philly hip hop on you guys.
Oh, wow. Now, first of all, when Touch of Jazz was first being formed as a company, which was Jazzy Jeff's company, he was making an effort to sign us. And shout out to Jeff because he really believed in us, and we did some songs with him, hanging out with Charlie Mack and all them, and he got some producers for us. But the thing was, at the time, he was still building his infrastructure, and they hadn't broken an act yet, and we were shopping ourselves around to a lot of people. So again, we jumped when the iron was hot. Now, as far as ESP, right? They had a 3 Times Dope You remember that song? ESP's the Act Nicholas One, the greatest man alive. But they had a studio that was down the street from one of the guys in our group's house, so we would see them all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like just rocking it on the street corner. Schoolie D, I've been to his crib. He's got a warehouse, man. Like a freaking warehouse. You can go rollerblading in it. Oh man, we had too much fun. But Schoolie D's another one. Are you hip to Bahamadia? Oh man, that's another broad.
Bahamadia name doesn't ring a bell.
Well, check her out, man. She is one of those like conscious female lyricists. Oh man, from Philly, Bahamadia. No joke. But to make a long story short, we come from that element, like the streets that we lived on. But because at the time in the 90s, all the labels wanted to do was copy Boyz II Men. They're like, no, you can't rap and sing, because we used to write our own verses and rap and sing in the same songs. And people were like, well, you got to pick one or the other because, you know, you can't do both. But now, you know, history has proven otherwise. And now if they got the singers rapping and the rappers singing. But this was before the Fugees, where, you know, it was a big deal for Lauryn Hill to be rapping and singing on the same track. So Philly hip hop had more of an impact on us than we were allowed to show in our music, which is unfortunate, you know, but that's just the way the industry was at the time.
Right. So did you guys think that you wanted to show that you were more than just suits and songs and wanted to have a more harder edge, kind of like what BBD was doing?
Yes and no. BBD, okay, I'll say in the 6 years before we were signed, we didn't want to be necessarily like BBD or like Boyz II Men, but the reason why we were called As Yet Untitled was because we did not want to limit our style. The closest thing I could say to what we were going for was our version of like the male En Vogue. How, like, you know how En Vogue, every song, they could do rock, they can do hip hop, they can do R&B, and they would change their wardrobe, the look and the sound to suit the material. Like how actors change characters with every movie. They're not stuck playing the same character over and over and over. So in a way, yes, like BBD had an element of that with the dance and like, you know, the rapping and all that. And it wasn't like we're trying to be like, you know, the Roots or any of these other acts that are out now doing those things. It's just that, again, when we were like writing and doing the kind of music we were doing, anything that had an element of hip hop, they wanted to pass that off onto somebody else. And then we wound up with no up tempos on, well, I'll say no hip hop up tempos on the first record. No complaining because that first record was a classic. But if we had a chance to do a second record or to redo a first record, we could have had at least one feature of an up-tempo, especially since Def Jam paid for the first video. We were on the same soundtrack with Jay-Z and Foxy Brown, you know what I'm saying, and Case. You know, like we had other bad boy acts. If you listen to that soundtrack, they managed to fit us in on a hip-hop soundtrack back then. So it seemed like Def Jam actually had more of the vision of where we wanted to go creatively than we did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell me about
Orlando, Florida. I'm gonna let that one ride. I'm sorry, somebody's calling me from Orlando, Florida, but no, I set aside the time for you, so they're gonna have to wait.
All right. So tell me about the original lineup of As Yet, how Mark came into the group, and getting your deal with LaFace.
Oh wow. Okay, I'll give you the short version. I won't give you the 6-year-long version, but short version is that in 1989. Me and Dion Allen were both singing in separate situations. This is after I got out of the gospel choir and I got recruited for that group. They were called Dimension and Sound. And Dimension and Sound was co-founded by a gentleman named Al Hyman, who still manages groups to this day in Philadelphia, not to be confused with Ali Hyman Productions. Anyway, this fella, he believed in me enough to want me to be in a group. And then in that group, there was a gentleman named Claude, who was basically like this genius Brian McKnight sort of arranger, piano player, really creative dude. Like I admire, to this day, I still admire his unique creativity. He used to want to show me how to bounce tracks on a double cassette. You know what I'm saying? Because he was real resourceful like that. So me and Claude and Dion, we met up because Dion went out of his group. He was in another group from what I believe they were called Devious and Dangerous, where it was like a DJ and a singing, kind of beatboxing, singing type of thing. He had a really the kind of hip hop edge that we were just talking about. Like imagine Dougie Fresh, you know, before Dougie Fresh being in the singing group, and he had the sickest beatbox. So he would beatbox and sing in front of this clothing store that was on my block. So every day when I'm on my way to school and getting on the train, because I was still in high school, and he was already out and he was working. So I'd hear him singing, and I'm like, man, who is this dude that won't shut up? He's singing to all the girls, and I'm like, he's alright, but like he's got way too much confidence to be out here like this, working at this clothing store. So I challenged him to a singing battle up in the middle of the street because, back then, you're young and you're just bold and whatever. And you're in my neighborhood. What you doing out here? And he starts making fun of me. Oh, I didn't know Julio's could sing. You know what I'm saying? We didn't bit of Puerto Rican. And he starts making fun of me. And next thing you know, we became good friends. We started singing together. We decided we wanted to get lead singers. All lead singers. Like everybody had, because that was the one thing I'll say about Boyz II Men and New Edition. And well, let's keep it at those two. Everyone knew each person's name. They individually had talent. So we were looking for a group to put together a group like that. You know what I'm saying? And we met, we were called As Yet Untitled when we got Dane and Core because his cousin sang in gospel choir with me. And the cousin was like, oh, you think you can sing? You can't sing. My cousin can sing. You got to meet him. And I was like, all right, well, if he can sing, I want to meet him. Right? And it turns out he could sing. So I'm like, hey, if you sing circles around me, that means I can focus more on the arrangements and spreading out, the vocals evenly amongst the group members. So then we had this cat, Kenny Terry, who's the legendary Kenny Bassman Terry. We actually were a 4-piece group, but then we went to this IM convention and went in Franklin Plaza, and we were singing for those guys I was telling you about. It was like, I think at the time we were singing for Andre Harrell. And all these artists were looking uptown. They were all looking for whatever kind of groups were popular then. And we went into the bathroom to rehearse in the hotel, and we hear this big voice coming out of one of the stalls. And we look down, and the legs are backwards. He's cleaning the stalls because whoever it was had a big, high-pitched voice. He was singing Patti LaBelle in Patty's Key. Feels like another one, just like belting. And we're like, how is this voice coming out of the men's bathroom in the stall? Right? And it turns out that it was Kenny, the bass man. He was warming up singing high parts. And we're like, man, you got this crazy range, right? Let's try, hey, you want to try singing harmony with us real quick? Next thing you know, after he got off work, he got redressed, we got some matching outfits, and we went back to the convention as a 5-piece, same day, that night. So that's how we got everybody in the short version. I may have skipped some of the original members, Claude and Dashawn. Now, I'll tell you about Claude because he was the arranger then. And Dashawn, he was brought in to replace a bass that we had before Kenny, another guy named Kenny Barber. I have no idea who he is, but I wish him the best. Kenny Barber was really cool, man. He was a brother that loved country music. He was ahead of his time. But for some reason it didn't work out with him. I can't remember because I'm old, but there's nothing personal. And then Dashawn came in, and he has like that baritone. He could hold the long belting notes. And he's still in the new current lineup. Him and Claude have returned to that lineup. But we'll get to that because I'm just answering one question at a time.
Right. Because when I interviewed Kevin Thornton from Color Me Bad, he was telling me the same thing about the acoustics and the bathroom is good for harmonies. And then the story with Boyz II Men was, I think Mike was in the bathroom and he ended up just filling in a part, and that's how he ended up getting in the group, I believe.
Yeah. So Mike and Kenny got a very similar story.
Right. So when you guys hooked up with LaFace, did you guys kind of fear that, okay, with LA and Babyface, and that they were going to try to pattern you guys after Boyz? And how did you guys make yourselves stand out once you got your deal and was going to the studio down in Atlanta to record the debut album?
Wow. Okay, that's a loaded question because on one part of that question implies that we would be concerned, but the thing is, we were wise enough to know back then that to be compared to the most successful group from your hometown in the current market was a good thing. So instead of it being a competition, we actually, every interview we've ever done, we would always point out how honored we are to be counted in the same breath because they opened the doors for us, because we were signed in order to be their competition, but we didn't enter into music to compete with anybody but ourselves. So we understand the game and how it's played, but there's no need to compete or try and tear anybody down. And the thing was with them, yes, we were concerned, but we didn't record in Atlanta. We went to Atlanta to take meetings and conventions and perform for the showcases and whatnot. And we did collab with some Atlanta artists, but the bulk of the record was recorded in Los Angeles because LaFace opened up a West Coast division, and we were the first artists to be solely produced on the West Coast. So we'd only come out to visit, for special events that were held by the label. Although I love Atlanta, and L.A. Reid believed in us as well. He was definitely hands-on in the business to a certain degree, but everybody would consider us Kenny's project, like Kenny Babyface Edmonds. They considered us his pet project as opposed to like another act sign. Although, man, we all partied with TLC, Tony Braxton, Goody Mob, Usher, all of Monica, anybody the whole Atlanta squad, Society of Soul, I can go on. What's my man's name? Donnell Jones. Just the whole Atlanta scene. Remember Tony Rich and Sam Salter. The whole Atlanta squad was tight. It's just that we were based out of L.A. We lived in L.A. and we recorded most of the record in L.A. So we were concerned that we'd get put on the back burner, though, because LaFace only puts on 1 or 2 acts a year. So we had to compete amongst our label mates to get enough attention to be considered a priority.
So LaFace kind of sort of modeled how they ran their label like how Berry Gordy ran Motown, so to speak.
In a certain sense, yes. And it's funny because you know better than most. Their history, part of Motown's history, was expanding outside of their original offices in Detroit. And once they quote unquote went Hollywood, it's like it's a bittersweet thing because I love Motown, and for what they represent and the obvious strides that were made on behalf of music, society as a whole, civil rights and everything else. However, the downside of that model, of a business model that's like factory based, is that you have to fit a certain model criteria, meaning they take you, they shape you, they groom you, they assign a team to you, and you just show up, sing, wear what they say to wear, and go where they say to go, and you become sort of like a product or a spokesmodel for the label's agenda. And again, I don't think necessarily that LaFace had a bad agenda. I have no regrets. I'd do it all over again. But the point I'm trying to make is that, even back then, there was this pang in my heart that knew that this was not the only way to do things. That why is it that certain types of artists are allowed to be locked away in a garage and bring you the record, and then they mix and master it and polish it. But meanwhile, other artists they can't do nothing unless the label tells you where you're going to be before you're there. They know your life and how it's going to turn out before you do. And that to me just never sat right. It just never sat right.
Right, I agree, because I went back earlier this week and listened to the Jacksons catalog from Motown all the way up to Epic, and you could really tell the growth of them once they made the switch from Motown to Epic, where they were able to have a little bit more creative control and more say-so.
Yes, but I will, to be devil's advocate, a lot of that development came at the hands of being able to try, succeed, fail, and try again, which the one good thing that the labels used to do back then is they would invest in you, like do a 7-album deal or a 5-album deal. You may think you're trapped, but once you get a couple of albums under your belt, man, you're going to be good at making albums, or better than you were if you just did everything yourself and without any guidance. So there is a case to be made that perhaps Motown may have polished them up enough that they were then able to learn from, what they went through and use that freedom. You know what I'm saying? They say that you only appreciate being free once you've been in a cage. So. Right.
So going into the studio, making the debut album, did you guys try your hand at writing records, or was it once you got there to record, you all started bouncing ideas with Babyface and the other writers on the album?
Ooh, it's a little of both in the sense that some of us had more aspirations than others when it came to the level of creative participation in the record. And there's different types of artists. For example, Whitney Houston is known for not writing her songs. She shows up, she sings, and she makes it her own. And there's nothing wrong with that. And then other artists, they have to do everything from scratch. They want to write every lyric because it's coming from them. All right? Now, when you're in a group, it's a democracy, but not a diplomacy. Meaning that it's like only closed mouths don't get fed. And the labels respond to people who are up in their face more than they do respond to the people who are actually talented. Because most of the time you can be creative, but if you're not assertive, they're not going to hear you. And then there's politics where it's like you can write a better song than their in-house writers, but if you're not an in-house writer, they're not getting a share of your publishing, so there's nothing in it for them on the back end to take your song. And man, I could tell you some stories about artists who've had those kinds of experiences of not being able to write their own song, and the song that got rejected by label A was their biggest hit on label B. Now, in our situation, I was fortunate. I did submit a demo, which became the final version of Hard for Me to Say I'm Sorry. So I got to co-produce and arrange a song with the legendary Babyface and David Foster. It was our biggest hit. Believe it or not, people say, oh, well, Last Night was #1 R&B. Yeah, but it was #1 R&B. But in the top 200, Hard to Say I'm Sorry went number 12, which was a lot bigger deal. And it got a Grammy nomination for Best R&B Vocal Performance Group or Duo. And that was the one song that anybody in the group got to co-produce. Now, Mark, he had written some songs that got placed, you know what I'm saying? What's the word for it? No sweat on him. No disrespect to him, but his songs weren't released as singles. He didn't get the same kind of, hands-on experience having revived some of his, existing catalog. So, other than that, the rest of the group members, unfortunately, for whatever reasons, were not, represented creatively other than how the vocals were delivered. And in that sense, I would consider Kenny Terry in that category, in that caliber of Whitney Houston, in the sense that, like, every vocal he sang rewrote the way the song went. So if anything, he deserved publishing on that record, because without his voice on it and the way that it sounded, nobody else could do it the way he did it.
Right. You mentioned, you mentioned earlier that Last Night was on the Nutty Professor soundtrack. So tell me, how did the song come about for you guys, and then the shooting of the video, which you shared an interesting backstory with me before our conversation prior to the interview. So tell me a little bit about that.
Word. Okay. So Last Night, a funny story. Last Night, the original demo, Babyface actually had a sketch of it. It had the chords and a skeleton of the beat, and he sang one take. And the way he sang it was just really straight and simple. He didn't put all the riffs in it or the harmonies, nothing, just a straight take. And even in that demo, we knew, man, he gave us his A game. This is going to be a smash. We had to sit on that song for almost 2 years before it got picked up by the Nutty Professor soundtrack, because he was working on Waiting to Exhale. He was working on Soul Food. He was working on a bunch of different projects around that time, and Tony Braxton's album and his solo record. So
he was a busy man.
So when we got that demo, right, he says, take it. Here's a cassette. Listen to it. Learn the whole thing, and we'll just try it out when we get there. So we show up at the studio, and he's like, okay, everybody line up. And he just went down the line and said, okay, sing this much, homie. Last night. Okay, you try it. Last night. Then you try it. Last night. You try it. Last night. All right. You. And then he just picked whoever's tone he liked at that moment. You're going in and you're singing up to here. Okay, so you're going to sing Last Night up into, and we explore your vision of love, which turned out to be Mark's part, right? So then with the I Drank Your Wine, originally it didn't have the riffs and stuff that I put in it. It was just, it actually had more words. It was like, into your soul, girl, I heard you moan, right? But somehow, I did 2 takes. And the second take, I did this crazy run because I didn't remember the words. And he's like, that's it, we're keeping it. I'm like, but wait, I can perfect it. I can do it. He's like, no, we're keeping it. Get out of the booth. And that was it. I didn't have time to think about it. It was done. That one part became people's favorite legendary thing. And it was something that was really off the cuff without any additional rehearsal, or I won't say effort, because it takes your whole life to get to the point where you can let go and forget everything you know and just be in the moment. So that being said, I'm thankful that one of the things I learned from Babyface's style of production is to leave room for happy accidents and let the higher power produce what you don't think of.
Yeah, because your run on that verse, it had for me that Latin flavor, very Enrique, Julio Iglesias, John Cicada.
Yeah, well, I love John Cicada. I love all of them, but I'm like, their records weren't even out yet. No, I'm kidding. John Cicada's record was out. Julio was big overseas, but his dad was more of the thing back in the early 90s. Well, all of them, you know, I love the fact that, to me, when you can reach across the aisle and unite people from different backgrounds, into a new style, you know, like, it's a bittersweet thing because being Puerto Rican, you don't want to be pigeonholed into what everybody thinks you're supposed to be. Like, you can only be Mark Anthony or Bad Bunny or reggaeton nowadays. Like, there's so many different influences, and there's a common heritage with the diaspora, the Afro-Cuban, the Afro-Rican. So we all share this common musical heritage, but society wants to marginalize you into this one little box. But if that's the case, we wouldn't have El DeBarge. You know, do you know that El DeBarge is French? Everybody think he's
No, I did not know. I did not know that. Tell me something I don't know.
Babyface all the time, but look it up. You'll find it. I thought he was like Puerto Rican or Latin because he got that Latin swag and he's got the curly hair. But technically, you know, anyone who speaks a Romance language is technically Latin, but he's French. You know,
right.
Get out of here. But like again, like with Hall & Oates or Tina Marie, like if certain artists you listen to with your eyes closed, Bobby Caldwell, you would never know what color they were. You just love the music.
Right, which shows how back during that time with Tina Marie and Bobby Caldwell especially, they wouldn't show their face on the labels so that they could get play on what was then called black radio, but now we call it urban radio. So that's how they tried to play both sides of the field without shocking the audience like, oh, he's white. Oh, she's white.
Well, speaking of which, right, you know how it goes back even further, because before it was black radio, they used to call them race records. You know what I'm saying?
Of course.
They literally would call them race records. But that's like, they're not even trying to hide the supremacy. But that's a whole nother conversation, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's more of a Professor Griff conversation.
Right. So once Last Night exploded and the video got major airplay on BET, whose idea was it to cover Hard to Say I'm Sorry by Chicago?
Now, that is a story that I've been waiting to share with you. Yes.
Go ahead. You have the floor.
But feel free to edit out anything that's extemporaneous. But here's what happened. There was a woman in my life who I flew from Philadelphia to Los Angeles around Christmas time. Now, around Christmas time, this is the first year that we had been away from Philly and our families, and most of the guys there all wanted to fly back to Philly. And I was like, you know what? I'm not up for that right now. I want to stay here and chill. You know, I'll have my lady come, who I thought was my lady, I'll say, but you know, have her come out and chill with me. So she came out and she did some other stuff. And she was running in. She used me as a way to get out to Cali so she can do some high climbing out there and do whatever. I have no idea. What's water under the bridge now? I wish her the best. I'm not going to say her name on the air. But that being said, I was sitting around lonely and heartbroken, feeling betrayed. You know what I'm saying? Feeling betrayed and hurt because, you know, she's like trying to sleep with the road manager and do all this other wild stuff, thinking she's going to get ahead in life. And I was just like, man, I can't believe I'm so stupid. I'm so dumb that I fell for this, right? So I'm sitting around. I got my Tascam 4-track, a recorder, and shout out to Tascam Porter Studio, right? And I had my little Alesis MIDI Verb and a microphone. And I was like, you know, I've always wanted to do that song over Hard to Say I'm Sorry. The song was in my head because I was in that kind of mood where it was hard for me to say I'm sorry because I wasn't sorry. You know what I'm saying? I was sorry that things turned out the way they did, but I didn't do nothing to this poor woman. She had her own agenda. So it took on a different meaning for me at the time, and I poured my heart into the arrangement because of the way things were happening around me. I put my own, you know, it's like therapy. So I did the 4-part arrangement, and then I sang the 5th part live because there's only 4 tracks on there. But when you make the bounce to the double cassette, you know what I'm saying, you can sing one extra part, but you got to do it live. And then I'm triggering the effects on the reverb live while I'm singing the lead onto the final cassette. Right? I just did it to pass the time and not go crazy. So then I get a call from Babyface's mother-in-law. God rest her soul, Jacqueline McQuarn. She called and says, what are you still doing home? All the guys went to Philly. I said, you know, I told her what happened with the girl, didn't work out, and blah, 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 blah. Right? And she says, why don't you come to Tahoe, to Lake Tahoe, with me and Kenny? I'm like, Kenny who? She's like, Babyface. Like, we're all going up to Tahoe for like 2 weeks. you know, like, why don't you come and kick it? You know, he thinks the world of you, you know, you're the only one still here, right? I'm like, okay. So, like, me, John D., Donnie Simpson, Daryl Simmons, you name it, like the who's who, people were coming in and out in this huge estate that's shaped like an E, right? So I had my little cassette, right? We just finished going skiing. Like, me and John D. were skiing. I never skied a day in my life, right? So we get out there, and I had a moment in the studio, and it just felt like the right time. And I said, Mr. Edmonds, Kenny, you know, could you listen to this and tell me what you think, right? And keep in mind, he's got this big fancy studio, and I got a cassette, right? I pop in the cassette. John B. was there. He was there. Daryl Simmons was there. They got real quiet. They listened to the arrangement, the demo, and when it was finished, he says, Babyface, he looks at me and says, I like this. We're going to do this when we get back, you know, after the holidays, we're going to record this. Right? I was just like, thank you. And I just got really quiet. Walked away, went in the bathroom, probably shed a tear or two. You know, then composed myself, came back, ate dinner, and we kicked it. You know, had great times kicking it with the family. And, you know, I think, you know, Babyface had more of an impact on me from that point on. And it was a bittersweet thing because, you know, I had to go through all of that suffering and heartbreak to even be in a position to make this piece of music. And then it became the single. Now, here's the other part that people don't know. Peter Cetera, from the original group Chicago, was brought in by David Foster. We never thought in our wildest dreams that we would have him on the remix of the single. We thought, oh, you know, it'll just be on the album. It's great. But Babyface played it. He played when we went to his house to record. He has a dope studio in his crib, like full on. So we go there, and you know, Kenny says, "Hey, you guys, you got this, right? Can you sing it for me one time?" We rehearsed it. We sang it live. He says, "Oh, okay. Well, I'll be back in like 4 or 5 hours." He gave me the con. I sat down, and basically the arrangement that we did, we recreated right there in the studio. 4 hours later, he comes back. He put his beat and his snap on there. You know, he had a suggestion to, like, originally it was supposed to be a fade out at the end. It was supposed, like, if you listen to the original Chicago song, there's another section. We cut out a few sections to make it more commercially available. So that was, shout out to Babyface for those suggestions, and as well as putting his polish on it, and the quality of the recording itself, the energy behind it and everything was great. So when he played it, he put David Foster on speakerphone. It was like, hey, Dave, I got something you need to hear. He plays it for David Foster. And David Foster says, hey, you know what? That's great, you guys. I want to be a part of this. So he played a new piano part, and then he calls Peter Cetera. Next thing you know, we're in the studio recording with Peter Cetera and David Foster. Then the video, the video that everybody makes fun of, right? People don't understand how expensive that video was back then. They think, oh, it's green screen, Six Flags Great Adventure. What they don't realize is that we had a 22-hour video shoot, 12 hours of standing doing the same choreography in multiple outfits, just to wind up keeping what they kept for the white suits and all those background parts. When we recorded, we didn't know that it was going to be green screen or not. I mean, we knew that there was a green screen, but for all we know, they could have put Cityscape behind us. They could have put, you know, Magic Mountain behind us. We wouldn't have known. We just showed up and we did the choreography, we sang, we did the close-ups, we did the wardrobe changes. You know what I'm saying? And then Def Jam paid for half the video. It was directed by Billy Woodruff. Billy Woodruff did everybody at LaFace, from TLC to Tony Braxton, you know what I'm saying, $1 million videos. So I'm sure, you know, it's not his finest work if you were to ask him, but the Hard to Say I'm Sorry video was actually the one where we're in the Hummer with the puppy and the whole thing. That to me was the best that he gave us. You know what I'm saying? Like the first video, yeah, green screen last night, you know, people laugh at it to this day, but you never forget the song. But that second video, with the spokes, we had like the microphone and the spokes and spinning. That was actually a suggestion I made at the dinner table. And I was surprised when I showed up on the set and he actually had it built. I was like, this motherfucker's not playing. This dude is not playing. So hats off to Billy Woodruff for that video. We literally just showed up and put on what they call it to wear. Though. It wasn't like we put a lot of, you know, pre-thought into that.
Right. And for those of you that don't Yeah, and for those of you who do not know who David Foster is, Google him, do the discography he wrote after The Love Is Gone for Earth, Wind & Fire, amongst many hits. But he was also in a little-known Canadian band called Skylark, which originally did Wildflower, which was made popular by New Birth, and since been covered by many others.
Whoa.
I know myself.
Well, you know what? That's not in dispute. I would like to add that if you don't know anything else about David Foster besides the fact that he did Earth, Wind & Fire and Whitney Houston, the Bodyguard soundtrack, Celine Dion, My Heart Will Go On. All right, I'll just stop right there. Like, if you ain't got, you don't know any of those songs, you won't know the stuff he did for Aretha Franklin or Shaka Khan. We can go back.
Yes, we could definitely.
One I didn't know.
Yeah, we can definitely peel back the layers and go to discography. So now those two records blew up, came out, and the debut album came out. It did well. Tell me about you guys going on tour. Who are some of the acts that you went on tour with, and the process of after the debut album and going to the studio for a second record?
Oh, man. Okay. So the first record came out, the single was out in July. So in the summer, Def Jam put the single out on The Nutty Professor. Then the album didn't come out till October. So that first summer, we had one number one hit. That's enough to get you on a tour. So we were doing, like, how they have, let's see, at the time they had like the Budweiser Superfest. We went on tour with everybody from 112 and Jagged Edge and Drew Hill, Shy, that whole circuit of R&B groups, but also, man, we were opening up for like the Wu-Tang in Europe. Like, we were doing these random shows, promotional shows in Europe. When the summer tours dried up, we went to Europe because by the time our second single came out, basically there was like three camps. You had the bad boy camp, LaFace's camp. Well, I'll just put it like this. In each camp there was every camp had their own R&B group. So like Drew Hill, 112, and As Yet. Boyz II Men was in a category by themselves because they, already, on their second and third records, and we're just coming out. So that being said, the touring was awesome. They say I sowed my royal oats, but, I think we were among the tamer groups out there. Like, nobody got locked up. Nobody had no kids floating around overseas that we know of. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like that wild, like no drug arrests or guns and nothing crazy like that. We weren't like, we're just not like that. But, we did have a lot of fun. That being said, let's see, Erykah Badu, D'Angelo, Eric Benet, Kenny Lattimore, I can go on, like, there's a lot of artists. And then when we did the Grammys, well, I'm skipping ahead, but the second album, because you asked me about that, I'm going to stay on track. Okay, so after the touring happened, the second single had already come and gone in that year, 1998. We got nominated for Best R&B Performance Group or Duo for That Hard to Say I'm Sorry. So at this point, this is the time when we're like, man, we hit all the, checked off all the boxes for this first album. Yes, we would have loved to have sold more records, but it wasn't a disappointment. We went, platinum multiple times over if you include the singles and the record and the Nutty Professor, and we were on other soundtracks in between. So while we were recording, we had a 7-album deal, and we were recording the second record, and a lot of songs. I mean, there are hundreds of unreleased as-yet songs. We parted ways with Mark Nelson in this recording process, and during the touring, unfortunately, things reached a point where we found it to be intolerable for all of us to move forward in this way. We tried correcting things amongst ourselves and as men with each other, working it out, and we just could not see eye to eye. And again, I wish Mark the best. He's out there in Vegas, and he's often performs with Boyz II Men, but he's parted ways with many groups, and his reputation speaks for itself. I wish him the best. That being said, we got a new member named LaDon at the time when LaFace stalled on our second record. It was less to do with our talent, but more to do with politics and things, management issues. And then once we got rid of Mark, they were kind of unsure. But we're like, look, you signed us without Mark. We got the record deal without Mark. Why are you so worried about Mark when we're telling you that we're not moving forward with him? He's not signed to our board. You can't make us keep him, and he doesn't want to be here any more than we want him here at the time. So that being said, we went to DreamWorks eventually. We got a deal with DreamWorks, which was a division of SKG, which is Steven Spielberg's company, a division of the film company. We were label mates with John B., Floetry, Papa Roach, Nelly Furtado, and a bunch of great artists that we were signed with, and Blackstreet. And Blackstreet was also they're the ones that beat us for the Grammy for they had No Diggity out that same year. No offense to them, but I thought it was R&B best vocal performance group or duo, not most popular recording. You know what I mean? Anyway.
Right.
They won, and it's not a slight to them. It's just I didn't think that their song should even be in the same category with what we're doing. It's Boyz II Men, As Yet, Take Six, Kirk Franklin, and God's Property, and No Diggity. Like it just didn't. It's no offense to them, but I think the Academy didn't really know where to put. Now they would call that more of like an urban hip hop record, and we would be in pop. But back then it was all race record.
It was all jumbled in one category. And while we're on the subject of No Diggity, I want to send condolences to the family of Bill Withers, who passed away yesterday. R.I.P. Mr. Bill Withers.
Rest in power.
Now
yes.
Yes. Now you mentioned you were over in Europe. Did you guys cross over and do a lot of shows with a lot of the European R&B acts like Damage? 3T was really huge over in Europe at the time, and then early on, Backstreet and NSYNC was cutting their teeth before they came over to America.
Oh, you know what's up. See, if anyone who's listening looks online, you can find a version of NSYNC singing Hard for Me to Say I'm Sorry, the As Yet arrangement, my personal arrangement, being sung by Justin and Company. They're like on a train or a bus or something. They used to be our opening act because back then, Transcontinental and those labels that were putting out boy bands in the U.S., they would send them overseas first so that they can basically make all their mistakes and cut their teeth without, being known of in the States until they got really good at performing. So they would go over there and get their feet wet. Meanwhile, we were there because we were already popular. So as strange as it seems, groups like Backstreet Boys and NSYNC were actually our opening acts. And yes, they did borrow, if not, I'll say steal, but, I'm glad they did. In a way, when I say take the arrangement and do what they did, because it just, to me, it's an honor that somebody thinks that anything that I created is of value. And again, it's like paying it forward because I didn't write the song. It was, David Foster and Peter Cetera. So it's like one good turn deserves another. So I wish them the best. So yes, when we were overseas, we would do these shows. Damage, they were part of the MOBO Awards that we were presenting in with Lionel Richie. So I think Damage would have done really well here. There's just something about the market and the way that the business is run here that doesn't seem to appeal to most of the the artists from overseas. It's not, or the label. There's something going on there where like either they're asking for too much money to compete in this market, and so they're like, we don't need it. There's only a handful that break through. And
right.
Most of the time they have really deep pockets.
Right. Well, what made it more amazing when Soul to Soul Loose Ends broke through with their unique take of British R&B was that it crossed over on both sides of the Atlantic. For those of you that don't know, MOBO stands for Music of Black Origin Awards. And I think the main reason why a lot of those international acts have a hard time breaking in the U.S. is because I think the sound for the European audience was more pop, dance heavy, whereas if you come over to America, you have to do like what NSYNC and Backstreet did when they came back to the States, which was take some songs off your international releases and put a few new records on for the U.S. market.
See, and you're right about that because there's one thing that the labels do well is they will find you somebody to remix your genre and make it palatable for the market. They'll find somebody to translate it to another language if need be to get it to fit. And that's the one thing. And on the flip side, right, I do believe that if you have the deep enough pockets and you believe your team believes in what you're doing, like there's groups like Soul to Soul, Brand New Heavies, the UK acts that were unique, they didn't need so much of an upsell because there wasn't as much competition. Like when you kind of come left field and you're original, people associate that uniqueness with what you're doing as opposed to like, oh, you're just trying to be like the UK version of fill in the blank. So there's something to be said for that. Like you can get around the deep pockets metaphor if you got something original. So, but I feel where you're coming from with that whole thing with the, like the style does definitely dictate the market.
Right, definitely that, and which is why I respect acts from the UK, because they make no hidden secrets about how much they were heavily influenced by urban music. I mean, George Michael had the #1 album on the R&B charts, won AMAs for Best Male R&B Artist and Album for 1989. So I felt the backlash that he had was completely stupid. And like you said earlier, music is colorblind. George Michael and Lisa Stansfield, Dusty Springfield, Lulu, Stones, Beatles. We can go on and on with all the acts from the UK that were heavily influenced by American R&B and took their cues from American R&B, the Northern Soul movement, which was the offshoot of what Motown was doing back in the 60s. They pretty much have a genuine love and respect for what American R&B has contributed to overall culture.
Amen to that. The only gripe I have with the quote-unquote culture vultures is when they don't not only pay homage but pay royalties to these artists that pioneered these things. When they don't get their just due, if I'm living in squalor and you're making more off of my stuff than me, there's an injustice going on somewhere. Right. That's my personal, but that has nothing to do, again, this is separate, it's more of a cultural, class, economic gripe than is a racial or skin color gripe. You feel me? It's an unfortunate byproduct of the society here in America, and again, this is more of a Professor Griff conversation, so I won't get too deep into it, but what I'm trying to say is that music belongs to everybody, but some people abuse the privilege. You know what I'm saying? Where like, they're just like, if you don't take them to court, they're going to swear up and down they came up with it. And I'm sure that history is filled with cases like that.
Yeah, so you mentioned to me some of the songs you all ended up demoing, but ended up going to other acts. What were some of the songs that you guys did that later went on and got put on Group A or Group B?
Ooh, well, I'll mention one of them that I know for sure came out because I saw it online the other day. There's a song by Blackstreet that was originally recorded by As Yet when we were on our second record with DreamWorks. We recorded a song with Warren Baby Dub Campbell. Shout out to Warren Campbell. You may know him.
Shout out to him.
Yeah, he's the. In addition to being like one of the top producers out there, he's also the husband of one of the Marys from Mary Mary.
Of course, Erica Campbell.
Eric, there we go. Okay, you got no, my man knows what's up. So that being said, he wrote the song. And it was so beautiful. We recorded it, and it wound up on Blackstreet's album, which, again, no diss to them, but we're on the same label. And sometimes I feel like the labels know ahead of time. They're like, look, we're going to get your competition to demo your song, and then you can recut it. Because we already know who we're putting out first. Because they got signed after us, and their record came out before ours. Ours never came out. So, hindsight is 20/20, and I love Blackstreet. None of this has anything to do with them personally, because it's not like they're sitting around plotting against us back then, and it probably wouldn't have made a difference either way, because until I mentioned it, I'm sure only the hardcorest of hardcore Blackstreet fans know Inner Rush.
Right, it was an album cut off of Another Level, I believe.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful song. I like what they did to it because, I'm a big Mark Middleton fan. I'm a big fan of the group. But they've had so many incarnations, and I've loved all the lead singers they had. Like, you remember when they did Joy? And they had, what's my man's name?
Yeah.
Eli, or what's his name? Levi Little, yeah.
Levi Little.
Yeah, he sang before, he was before Mark Middleton. I like, Chauncey and all of them, but they just never could keep one lineup long enough, which I guess it's a blessing and a curse, because everyone looks at that group and says, oh, that's Teddy's group. But it didn't necessarily open up. It didn't seem to yield that many fruits beyond that project, which is unfortunate because everybody's talented and they're deserve to shine, in my opinion.
Right. And speaking of Joy, I was reading in various articles that when Teddy was doing interviews stating that Michael as in Michael Jackson, demoed Joy, and it was supposed to go on Dangerous, but it didn't make the cut.
Now, I wouldn't doubt that, because around the time they were working on that, the same thing happened to Rodney Jerkins. He was recording so many songs for Michael, like 100. He got a budget to this is what I heard. I didn't see the contract. However, I remember being in the studio watching him just make song after song, tracks. He had like 100 songs that he submitted for Michael's record, and 99 of them didn't come out. So that's not a new story, but it's a lesson in how the industry works, because the one thing that Clive Davis used to do, Clive Davis would do the same thing. One of his strategies was he'd have you submit at least 100 songs to pick 10, and the last 2 singles would be picked within a week to a month of the release date, because he wanted the up-tempo or the most current thing to be so current that the rest of the record is done already. Like that philosophy, we don't have an album philosophy anymore. It's more of like a disposable instant single. If it doesn't take traction in 2 weeks, it's dead in the water type mentality. Or you spend a whole year on one song because it takes so long to build up and ramp the promotion and get the ads and get, press and spins, and, like it's a different approach to things now, where like from now, the life cycle for a song can be 2 years, but the life expectancy is 2 minutes.
Right. It kind of feels like it's like a hyper version of the 1950s and 60s, where it was basically singles driven.
Yeah. But the differences with the singles back then was people had to physically, like, you can only listen on the radio. Like now there's so many scattered formats. I guess Spotify would be the new, radio. But like, people have alternatives. They can get it for free on YouTube. You can hear whole songs when you want, skip commercials. You don't have to plug into the radio at a certain time of day to hear an hour of your favorite music. I mean, not that we should go backwards. I'm just saying that, like, it was even harder for, like, bringing it back to As Yet, when we went platinum, that meant that we sold 1 million physical copies that somebody had to get in their car or get on a bus and drive or walk to Sam Goody. You know what I'm saying?
Warehouse, Turtles, Blockbuster Music, Camelot, Recordland, On Cue. I can name all the defunct music stores.
Right. So when you get there, you put on, like most people I know, if you're on a budget, you're like, all right, I'm coming here with a budget of X amount to buy 1 or 2, maybe 3 albums in a month, if I'm lucky, because I'm broke, right? And then I'm like, okay, but before I spend this money, I got to listen to the whole album. Like, they have a little headphone station, and you go to the little station,
the listening station.
And they'll let you listen to a snippet of each single, right? So
like 20, 30 seconds.
Yeah. So if I like 2, if I already like you as an artist, and like let's say it's, I don't know, Anita Baker, I'm getting it anyway. Luther Vandross, back in the day, like this is certain artists, Stevie Wonder, anybody who takes this is albums that I just buy because it's them. Layla Hathaway, oh my God, if Layla Hathaway puts out a record, I don't care what the album cover looks like. I don't even have to read. I just get it, right? But if it's a new act, man, you got to get me with at least 3 songs before I spend $10. Because if not, I'll just buy the single and the B-side for 2. So
right, exactly.
All of that, and then still choose you out of all those choices in the store. So now there's a million sales. Nobody downloads anything when they can get it for free. So you'll have 100 million views and make less money than off of 1 million sales.
Right, and now if you want to get signed to a label, who would want to do that now? They want a piece of your streaming with the 360 deal, and the 360 deal, for those of you that don't know, they want your merch money, they want your tour money, they probably want your streaming money, and then that little advance that they give you is coming out of your pocket. Look at the VH1 Behind the Music where Left Eye breaks down a contract.
We were signed to the same label, so we had those contracts. Talk about them. Yeah, you speak the truth. My man speaks the truth. So check this out, right? When the one thing I will say is that by the time a label is interested in you, you probably don't need them financially, because you're already making enough money to pay for your business. However, the one thing that labels still seem to have a lock on is the kind of connections in mass media and the good graces thereof to catapult you into a level of fame that you probably wouldn't want if you've walked a mile in any of our shoes. When I say any of our shoes, anybody who's even had a slight taste of fame usually has a tragic story somewhere in there, because it's not for everybody and anybody. When you're born into it, you squander it and don't realize it. When you earn it, you don't want to let it go. And everybody looks up to all these people because they're famous, when really that's no guarantee. If anything, it's probably more likely than not that you are imbalanced in some way if your natural reality requires fame. If you can't sustain yourself as an individual and withstand all that comes with that fame, it will eat you alive. It'll drive you crazy. You know, like you said about VH1, the stories, for every story that you see on there, most of them are like tragic stories, or they have a comeback aspect because something happened where there's a you know, they build you up and then they break you down. So, you know, I wish people the best. I think my idea of success now when it comes to all this thing, like with the labels, if a record label says, hey, we believe in you and we'll want to do a distribution deal, or we'll pump in some promotional money in exchange for a share of the profit, I'm all in. Let's do it. It's a non-exclusive deal for this project only, and I can do that all day, every day. But in addition, you know, like there's got to be something in it for everybody. Like, you know, the days of artist development are over. I recognize
definitely that.
I mean, yeah, and they would rather have 10 new artists than one expensive artist, and expensive means you know what you're worth. So, and when you're as old as I am, you got to do it yourself. In a sense that, like, you know, I'm not Michael Jackson. You know, I don't have any illusions of grandeur. You know, I'm not Frankie Beverly. You know, so anybody who's interested in doing something with me is because they believe in the music that I'm creating, not because they're still trying to sell As Yet records from 1998.
Right, and which you and I, we had a conversation about this before we did our interview, and that's what I respected about Prince, because Prince was all about DIY back in a time when the labels was the only game in town as far as how to get a deal and how to distribute your stuff, because they were the gatekeepers. They controlled where your stuff was going to go, who was going to play it, and greasing some palms and some radio stations.
Well, yes. And one of the things that he was ahead of his time on is that he sold his music exclusively from his website. So he controlled all the traffic, all the views, all the clicks, all the spins, and everything in between. And he kept that database of you know, subscribers and his fans. That relationship where, like, you know, if he was going to do a pop-up concert, or he released unreleased singles, or, you know, that people are doing that now. It's all the rage. Well, people are giving away, you know, the ones where they say, pay what you think is fair. Like, we'll give it to you for free, but, you know, we'll take an optional donation. You know what I'm saying? But the thing is, though, right, there's an illusion that a lot of people are falling for nowadays. They think, oh, well, you have no excuse because you've got the internet and you can reach everybody. No, you can't. I'm going to tell you, you can believe what you want. But if we are all on equal footing and anyone can blow up, why is it that there are advertising schemes and algorithms set up so that even though you have 20,000 followers, only 200 people see your music unless you pay? So there's still a firewall of money. And again, that's how these labels still control the industry. They already saw this coming. They've been legislating. They've been fighting in Congress, trying to change the laws to benefit them and say, well, look, if you want access to make money off of our existing catalog, you've got to make it more difficult for these new artists to break free, because they're going to suck up the bandwidth that we need to sell our music. So if you still want to get to a certain level, if you want to get, you know, into the millions and millions of views, you're going to have to grease some palms. You're going to have to buy ads, pay for streaming, and maybe even hire publicists and separate. And I'm not saying these are bad things. I'm just saying that it's not as easy as sitting up in your mother's attic, making a track, and then releasing it and expecting all of a sudden, because it's great music, that someone's going to fall in love with it and the right person will share it, and next thing you know, it'll make you $10 million. If that happens, it's the exception to the rule. It doesn't prove the rule.
No, it does not.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, no, it does not. You have the influencers too. Now, back to As Yet. Man, the time period where you guys were out, it was stacked with R&B groups. You guys, Boys, 112, Jagged Edge, Next, Profile, Ideal, Drew Hill. I can go down the line of all those groups. So how did you guys feel knowing that all these groups were out and you looking amongst each other and you're like, I know we're better than this group. Oh, we can out-sing them under the table.
I'm gonna be real with you, man. This is not
be all the way real. Keep it 100.
Always. Now I'm reverting back to the 20-something-year-old me, the 90s me, not how I feel now. But at the moment, when this was all going on, we honestly, we had these conversations in our group every single day as part of our routine. We would remind ourselves how much better we were than these other groups. Not we're better at being Drew Hill or we can out sing them or no. We just would look at our advantages and say, well, look, we're the only ones with 5-part harmony. And if there's another group that has 5 members, they sing in 3 parts in an octave and one guy's rapping. Like they ain't doing what we're doing. And yes, Take 6, they got 6-part harmony, but you know what I'm saying? We're younger and, you know, we're better looking. Our bass sings in 3 octaves. Like we'd always come up with an excuse for why we were, I say an excuse, but a reason why we were better than other groups, and not better like we're better people than you and you're beneath us. None of that. But like back then, it was a competitive thing, but we weren't trying to out group another group. Like we had respect for all of them because they had their pros and cons too. Like Silk, you know what I'm saying? Like we used to make fun of them and love them at the same time because they had a distinct sound. But we're like, man, that little bald-headed dude with the high old voice singing, bad roll, bad roll, bad roll. He's singing all this high note. I can't even sing up there. Bad roll. right. They're like, man, what is he squeezing down there to hit the high note, right? We making fun of them. And like Shy, oh my God. Shy, they're going to want to kick my ass after I say this. Pardon my French, but, you know, we used to be like, how did they even get a deal? Like, I don't care how good you look. They're just going, ooh, da-do-do-do-do. And that's the whole song. They might as well just cut it right there. Because the whole song is them same 4 chords. It's actually 1 chord, just inverted. Anyway,
disclaimer, these are not my views. I just want to throw that out there.
Exactly. Right. I'm just saying that we really would clown them back then. And you know what? To be honest, I remember one time we were talking to 112, and the way we became friends was because, you know, they would say stuff to Q. He would say, man, you know, tell you the truth, man, we hated y'all when y'all came out. And we were like, man, we hated y'all too. Okay, cool, we sang. You know, like, it was like that. And shout out to 112, man, because amongst all the groups that we performed with, I feel like they were the closest ones to being real friends. You know what I'm saying? Like, where we could hang out and there wasn't no competition because we had the same parent company because Arista was also LaFace's and Bad Boys' parent company. You know what I'm saying? And like, you know, we had mutual friends from all the different parties and everything. So yeah, we used to say, we knew we were better vocally, and it was kind of an injustice that we didn't sell as many, if not more, records and all this other stuff. Like, it's easy to, if you grade success by the metric of popularity and record sales, you're really not looking at things accurately because you have to ask yourself, when you strip away those numbers, what is the impact of what you've done? And to me, the biggest, the best thing that's ever come from the whole experience of having struggled to succeed in this industry and fail successfully and rebound, the biggest success, the best thing I've ever contributed to this world is my 3 children. Period. Like, if nothing else, you know, I can say that, you know, that is what I have to show for all the efforts that I made. Is that I brought 3 beautiful children into the world.
Right, family over everything is what they say. Now with all of you guys, like Shy, Boyz II Men, Silk, Intro, tell me about the influence that gospel groups like Take 6 and Commission had on you guys' sound, and also how you all looked at a group like a New Edition and kind of said, okay, we can incorporate a little bit of what New Edition's doing, but take the sounds of Commission and Take 6 and really, you know, explode with it.
Wow. Well, during that time, right, when we were developing our sound, the one artist that we all agreed on was Take 6, because they had really great harmony and fortunately for us, the group had the ability and the ear to dissect. You know, we would break their songs apart by ear and recreate them, and we performed Tech Six songs live. Like at the Apollo, we sang "Oh Mary, Don't You Weep" and brought the house down, standing ovation. And man, I would love to find that recording. It's out there somewhere. But make a long story short, Commission, they were the predecessors of what became the groups like the Jodeci's. And like we talked about before, a lot of people know that, you know, KC referenced Running Back to You when he says, "My arms are open wide and I don't have to cry no more." And, you know, Boyz II Men, when they did that Ba-doo, Ba-doo, they stole the whole ring. Well, I don't think they stole, but they recreated.
They borrowed.
You know, and this, yeah. And that's all good. I think they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So that being said, there were a lot of other gospel artists around that time, like Daryl Coley and Vanessa Bell Armstrong. I mean, I can go on, but like just certain types of, oh man, even James Moss, the Clark sisters, Maddie Moss Clark. Man, there's so many artists. But the gospel
Dawkins
music,
and Dawkins.
Oh, you know, before it was Dawkins and Dawkins, right? There was just, aren't they the son of they're the son of the senior Dawkins. I gotta, you know, I'm not, you know what, I'm thinking of, Tremaine Hawkins. Never mind. Sorry. That's a whole nother, oh my God, Tremaine Hawkins. Oh, so I'm gonna hit your listeners to this, something that we talked about in regards to those gospel influences. If you love Take Six and you love any of the gospel artists you mentioned, from Take Six to the Clark sisters to Commission, there's an album that a lot of singers are hip to. It's been out for a minute. It's called Handel's Messiah, Together We Sing. It's a gospel remake of classical music from the composer named Handel, Handel, but it's got the Clark sisters and Commission singing a duet together called King of Glory. It's got Vanessa Bell Armstrong and Daryl Coley singing Comfort Ye My People. It's like, it's one of them joints that, like, if you love music and singers, and you happen to be of a gospel bent, you'll enjoy it that much more. We got to work with Mervyn Warren from Take Six on our first album. So to answer your question, I think because of us working with Mervyn Warren and Brian McKnight, whose his brother is in Take Six,
Claude.
probably, yes, they're single-handedly, without a doubt, the largest influence on the As Yet sound. I would have to say is Take Six. However, not the only influence.
Right. And also, while we're on the subject of gospel, I got to mention the group Company. Donald Lawrence was in that group. They were signed to Giant. They had a song, Somebody's Praying for You, and Angel, which was produced by Mr. Stanley Brown.
Oh, yeah. Man, man. I used to love them. Now, shout out to Donald Lawrence. My favorite song that I still listen to this day, and it's probably not that old to y'all, but you know, I know that you, the song you do with, what do you call it? It's Kelly Kelly, I was about to say Kelly Clarkson. No, it's Kelly Price.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly Price, and Lejeune and all them, what's it called? There's two versions of it, actually. There's one with the Clark sister, with Karen Clark in it, and there's one with Kelly Price in it. It's a Donald Lawrence single, right? God's Favor is more precious than life. Oh my goodness. You gotta hear both versions of that song. One's got Kim Burrell on it. Oh man, she's another one.
Oh man, singers, not singers. Singers.
We used to bump Kim Burrell all day and night. Not that we don't anymore, but like her first records, oh my goodness, all day and all night.
Right. And also going back to Philly, we're going to circle back to around like 99, early 2000s, when you had the neo soul movement coming out. You had acts such as Jill Scott, Music, Belial, Floetry kind of came out of that camp. So tell me, what was it like being around at that time, seeing the neo soul movement take off?
Oh man, you know what? One of the best things, I feel like that movement was ahead of its time, because the neo-soul movement divided our group amongst certain lines. And without calling out people's names, some members were like, you know, that's old folks music, and I like digital, man, because that's where it's at. And you like music that has instruments in it. And I'm just like, what is music without instruments? It could be a cappella, but your voice is an instrument. What are you talking about? So we would get into these arguments because everybody, you know, some people want to be hip and new and try to follow the thing, and neo-soul was kind of like, we took it for, well, I won't say we, but some of us took it for granted because that's what we grew up listening to. Was like there's so many open mics where we'd have a house band, and the house band would know every song, and they would just jam out on different chords, and you would freestyle over it. And that's a lot of the chords that came out of the church, the same way that like let's say the Clark sisters influenced Faith Evans, or the Commission influenced Jodeci. The musicians that played in the church would put all these cool, soulful riffs and chords, substitutions, alternate voicings and whatnot over traditional R&B, and that combined with Philly's unique hip-hop and soulful vocals became this sound. And we actually got a chance to work with Marsha Ambrosius from Floetry. While we were signed to DreamWorks, we were label mates with them. So we had a chance to like create some new things again that never came out, but those recordings exist. But unfortunately, because I already know the next question is going to be, what happened to those songs? Can I get a copy? But the thing is, if the producers never got paid, even if we co-wrote the songs together, it's not my place to put their music out without them getting paid. It's not, you know what I'm saying? So it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy how many beautiful pieces of music we made like enough neo-soul songs to be an album. And I still to this day incorporate, because it's part of who I am and where I'm from, incorporate some neo-soul vibes. You know, like I love a good and classic Rhodes sound, you know, or whirly. I love alternate voices and keys and just different sorts of soulful feelings. And I feel like neo-soul has stood the test of time. When they say if it lasts a year, it's a fad. If it lasts 3 years, it's a trend. And if it lasts 5 years, it's a style. You know, it's a vibe, and pretty much you're stuck with it. When I say you're stuck with it, how long has it been since trap music came out? Don't answer that. But the point is, you know, I think there's always going to be room. Like once you've lasted past a certain, you know, once you put a stamp on something, you can't unstamp it. And I'm so proud of the neo soul movement because it actually captures to me, it accurately captures the vibe, the musical vibe of Philadelphia. All of these artists, from the Roots to, you remember Vivian Green?
Emotional roller coaster. Yes, I do.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, shout out to Jill Scott. Oh my God, still bump her to this day. But I mean, you know, there's other artists that didn't get the shine, you know, that the Music Soul Child got. You know,
Jaguar Wright.
Equally good. Oh yeah. You know, Carol Riddick. There's a bunch of them. Lady Alma. But also even artists like Leda Hathaway have incorporated neo soul into their music, and it's the closest thing to that fusion of like soulful jazz, R&B music for when you outgrow that teeny bopper radio, when you'd rather sip a glass of wine at a cabaret with your pinky out than be at the
on your grown man stuff.
Yeah, man. Like the stage before when you're about to make some babies.
Right. When you're at but you're at that stage when Johnny Gill talked about these are the things that change boys to men.
Amen. I know that's right.
Exactly. So now I also want to talk about too as well, by you being Puerto Rican, how I think the freestyle movement does not get enough credit for the groundwork that it laid for Latin R&B, Latin hip hop. So like your Bad Bunnies, your Daddy Yankee, and your Shakira, J-Lo. And I want to give this guy, I feel, was so underrated as a musician. I'm glad that he's gotten his shine behind the scenes, but my man Bobby Ross Avila.
Oh yeah, him and his brother actually were partners. The Avila brothers were, people don't notice, they were partners on the Dr. Dre's beats.
I did not know that. So he's probably living off some royalties.
Headphones, yes, they were part of the development team. They're on the box. If you buy the headphones, you will see somewhere on there. I'll take a picture and send it to you. That the Avila brothers were co-presenters of the beats, along with Dr. Dre. And that's a big thing, especially, you know. Now, I'm not one of those cats. I grew up in Philadelphia. Both my parents are Puerto Rican. Well, one of my parents is dead. But that being said, being born there or born here doesn't mean that it's all one culture and it's all one thing. You have Afro Puerto Ricans, you have Euro Puerto Ricans, you have some of us that speak Spanish, some that are darker and lighter and everything in between, because we have a history of the slave trade working the sugar canes with the indigenous people known as the Taino, which were a form of what we would call Amerindians, along with Europeans from various points of Spain, Portugal, and whatnot. So it's difficult to explain or to try to educate people to say, look, you know, we're not only are we not all the same, but we're more alike than we are unalike. Like, chances are we both have a common heritage. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's not like,
right.
Like it's a separate country, and that just because you speak Spanish, you're from Spain. That's like a whole other thing. That's a whole other thing. Like, you know, no offense to any other of my fellow cousins who speak Spanish or not, but the American culture tends to be ignorant towards these things. So for me, I didn't choose, nor would I choose to not be or to be Puerto Rican. It's just a circumstance of birth. That being said, you know, I feel as though it's important to know all parts of your history. And if you know that the slaves were brought to bring the sugar cane to work the sugar cane for the United States, and that slavery ended years after it was ended in the United States, they still kept it in Puerto Rico for that purpose. You know what I'm saying? So it's not anything to be excited or brag about. It's just to be knowledgeable so that when you see them trying to divide us, you can say, hold up. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, hold on, we're more alike than we are unalike. And that being said, right now I'm in a singing group. After I thought I was done with this, I thought I was done because, you know, the music changes moved on. But I came back to Philly, you know, after my divorce, and I met these guys. They were already together, and one of them used to be in the Barrio Boys that you mentioned before, a group of Puerto Rican cats from my hometown who can sing their asses off. And they wanted me to produce a song for them. And after I met with them and was kicking it with them, and, you know, I came in thinking I was just going to be like a guest artist on this one song. But by the end of the recording, I was like, hey, you guys want a fifth member? And they were like, get out of here. And I was like, no, I'm getting in here. Let's do this. You know, because I'm like, you can't afford me because, you know, if I charge you for every song, and I want to be in the song because I want to be a part of what makes me feel good about music. And it wasn't because they were Puerto Rican, but because they are Puerto Rican, it's almost like an added thing of like, well, we have a lot in common that we don't have to explain. We just do.
It's unspoken.
Yeah, it's an unspoken, familial sort of connection. Not a us versus them, because it's all of us in this together. But after having explained that to you, I think, you know, the fans will love it because we're trying to keep that Philly sound, that 90s R&B, acapella, 5-part harmony, that whole thing. This is the closest I've got to ever feeling. As a matter of fact, some of the arrangements that never made the As Yet records, we're singing now. So check out Viva Mas, VIVAMAS, VivaMas.com. You know, Google us. We just did a remake of Garth Brooks when he did that alter ego as Chris Gaines. Mm-hmm. Remember that joint, Heaven Knows? It was a big single.
Oh, yeah.
But everybody made fun of him because they were like, oh, why is he doing R&B? He sounded like Robin Thicke. But, you know, that was back in 2000. The song's almost 21 years old now. You know what I'm saying? We redid it over. Acapella, shot a video in Philly with the skyline in the back. And people are loving it right now. We should have an album out next year.
Okay, DivaMas.com. And on a side note, I'm going to deviate real quick to talk about Puerto Rican food. I discovered my love of Puerto Rican food when my wife and I went to Las Vegas last year. Went to this little restaurant in a strip mall. Food was bomb. I had some pernil. I had some mofongo. I was like, oh man, I am in heaven. And this is what I get for living in the South all my life and not having a diverse neighborhood. I mean, I fell in love with it, man.
Oh man, well, I'm gonna break it down for you real quick. There's one secret I can share with everybody. The secret to great Puerto Rican cooking is all boils down to the sofrito. Now, sofrito is like, it's a spice, it's a sauce, it's a combination of specific ingredients, certain types of peppers, herbs, and spices that you blend and make yourself that becomes a key ingredient that you then add to your rice and beans, to your pernil, to your mofongo. Sometimes it's used as a side dipping. It's basically like, well, without giving away the full recipe, you can look it up online and find sofrito. But it's kind of like, okay, the Mexicans have salsa, the Indians have curry, we have sofrito. It's like there's so many ways to do it up, but it's like a 5-spice or a 6-spice type deal. That's what gives the tang, and a lot of it was taken from the African cuisine and mixed in with the Spanish cuisine and with the local vegetables on the island. So it's definitely one of my. If you like Jamaican food or any kind of Caribbean food, you will love Puerto Rican food. And if you've never tried it, it won't burn your face off. But man, if you go to the right places, oh man, you'll be so thankful.
Right, that's how I am, because I'm very picky about what I eat in as far as spices go, but that's a whole nother topic for another day. Now, back to the music. So with the digital age and everybody being all self-centered with the likes, Instagram, TikTok, whatever social media platform you use, do you think we have seen the end of groups, or will there be another cycle where groups will make their way back again?
All right. I'm noticing a resurgence of groups. You would think that because of social distancing, that people wouldn't want to congregate. However, what I'm noticing is that there are groups that were already in existence before this crisis, who, for whatever reason, have more time to rehearse. And there are groups, at least within the tri-state area, that I'm noticing online. Like I said, I'll send you some links to some folks because, again, to answer your question, there's always going to be, as long as there's music, there's always going to be an incarnation of what groups are. Now, it changes form, you know what I'm saying? Like from boy band to R&B, like how you were talking about New Edition earlier, right? New Edition was a spinoff of the Jackson 5, you know what I'm saying? But also the Osmonds spun off from the Jackson 5. And off of New Edition, you had groups like Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, who are also influenced by Azette, who was also contemporaries of Boyz II Men, who are also influenced by the Temptations and the Four Tops, 4 and 5. Like that pattern repeats itself. Right. In a new beat. I could go on.
Yeah, let's not forget New Kids on the Block.
Oh man, I couldn't forget them at all. Now that's exactly. Thank you for helping me prove the point that no matter what the era is, there's always a group of some sort, whether it be girl groups like Destiny's Child or some group that we haven't heard of yet. Now, my personal contribution to the future is Viva Mas. We're working on a record, man. The stuff that we got that's unreleased is coming out. We're in the process of shooting the videos and, building the social media campaign. And I think that as long as people are willing to work together, and there will always be a love for that, because a lot of these colleges too, especially the HBCUs, they have choirs. And when you graduate and you leave a choir, some people still have that love for the harmony. And I see there's a group, and it's funny because this is not a historically black college, but there's a group called Voices of Yale, right? And Voices of Yale is basically a handful of people of color on the campus who decided we're going to start a choir outside of the Glee Club because we want to do music that's more soulful and more representative of the diaspora. They took it upon themselves to cover hard for me to say I'm sorry, and I was so honored. So shout out to Voices of Yale. And these are the future. These kids are 20 years younger than me. And although I turned down Ivy League scholarships, but I still made it to Yale in the form of
right.
But that means there's going to be groups, yes.
Yeah, which makes it interesting because I thought that once the sing-off on NBC and Pitch Perfect exploded, that you will see a resurgence of a cappella groups.
They're out there, but it's more of a thing where I think the expectation is so low from relative to where we come from. See, we're used to consuming our music the way we were used to consuming our music. So if you and I are expecting groups to have the kind of impact they had in the 90s, it's probably not going to happen. You know what the closest – this is going to sound weird, but the closest thing that I've experienced to that since then is Pentatonics. And I love Pentatonics. But as far as being a crossover a cappella type group that made other people want to copy and sing what they did and like that kind of mass influence and record sales and all those things, that kind of a slot is only reserved for people who are plugged into the machine. Like if you're meant to be that artist, you already know who you are. you know? So that being said, I don't think there will be a market. I could be wrong, which I hope I'm wrong. I would love to see a flourishing of primarily groups like it was back then. But the culture that people are being raised in is so individualistic and so me, and so narcissistic. Like, keep in mind that these groups that were coming up, we didn't have Instagram where, like, everybody's got... Can you imagine if you're in a group, but you're competing with people who have more and less followers than you, so they think they're more popular, which means that they're more valuable to your situation, or they've got people in their ear all the time telling them that they should be... I mean, it's the same thing it used to be times 10.
Right.
So it's less likely, not impossible, but less likely that we'll have, 4 different individual singing groups in the same genre, all on the same top 10 chart in the same market at the same time, like it was back in the 90s. But will there be some really dope groups, of which a few of them will be on, like, say, Tiny Desk concerts, or like my man Jacob Collier. He's working with Quincy Jones right now. He's doing a cappella as one dude, and he brings in musicians and artists to do these really cool, funky arrangements, and he's like a phenom in regards to his arrangements. They're like take 7. So I recommend Jacob Collier. Anybody? He's another one of them soulful white boys. He's just that dude. And again,
right.
I don't know what the future holds because I've been wrong before. I thought we'd be done with trap music by now. I'm not trying to take nobody's bag away, but I remember
don't do that.
I know I would never do that. So, but I used to think, you remember when Timbaland? Like, I love Timbaland, but like there was a certain beat that was associated with him. That boom, yeah, doom, 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 yeah. If I hear another doom, 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 yeah, I want to fucking doom, 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 blow my brains out, right? Like after a while, you just get sick of hearing the same thing, no matter what it is. It don't matter who's doing it. You're just like, maybe you won't want to hear a cappella because you're like, damn, I need some drums in my life, or I need some strings or guitars. Like, I'm sick of hearing just a cappella all day. So, that sword cuts both ways, man.
Right, which for me, which for me, that's what makes Bruno so refreshing, where he's repackaging what was out in the 80s and 90s and giving it a fresh take, because he studied pretty much 80s, 90s R&B. Pretty much the whole 24 Karat Magic album was 90s R&B revisited for me.
Yeah, and and in a way, it's for better or for worse. I think a lot of the haters. By the way, shout out to Bruno Mars. He's also a fellow Puerto Rican. People don't know that too. He's also Puerto Rican, Filipino. He's Puerto Ricano. But you know what I'm saying. The thing is about him. The haters will say, "Oh, all he did was copy X, Y, and Z." But what they're really saying is, why didn't I think of that combination? Because I grew up listening to it. This is so familiar to me that anybody could have done it. Yeah, but you didn't do it. He did it with his team, with his people. So I give him props because as derivative or as whatever as the critics say it is, it feels good to listen to. He's great in performances and at concerts. It's still good music. The world needs that instead of so many critics and, not enough creatives. So
because that album...
Bruno Mars.
Yeah, I love Bruno too, because that album I played all the way through. And when I first heard Finesse, I immediately thought of Ralph Tresvant.
Right. Oh, man.
Immediately, like it was definitely a cut dive to the scene going on Ralph's album. And just a few more questions, and I'm going to get you out of here.
You got me all day. Let's do this.
All right. So speaking of Philly, we haven't talked about Philly World, Rough House, and the impact of Lady B and Street Beat Power 99 has had on Philadelphia. Tell me about that.
Man, you said Lady B. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Now, for those of y'all who are listening who grew up in Philly, you already know this, but for everybody else, Lady B, okay, before there was like a breakfast club, you know what I'm saying? In Philly, you would get up in the morning or after school and whenever, and you'd go to Power 99. Power 99 was the station for what we would call, urban music today. And they would break all the new songs from those local artists. We used to call in, even when we as yet wasn't signed, we did drops for them. We did acapella Power 99 FM with Lady B, acapella Lady B, right? And send it in, and they were like, they played our drop. We thought we were famous then because she played it. But she's basically like what Dee Barnes was for Pump It Up. That was Lady D.
Out in LA.
Yeah, man. But she basically had that that authenticity, that Roxanne Shante vibe, you know, like, I mean, she's her own woman, so I'm not taking anything away from her. I just mean that, like, you knew everything that she said was real and that she's from where you're from and that you can relate to her, and she would give artists, you know, shout outs and plugs that were local, but also incorporate what was going on around that time. She was like basically the queen guardian of the culture from, I couldn't give you the years. You'd have to look it up because for me it seems like she never really left, even though it's been that many years, you know what I mean?
Right. So she was Philly's answer to what Red Alert and what Mr. Magic was doing up in New York on BLS and Kiss.
Pretty much, but in a sense, being a woman and holding it down was even harder back then and by herself. So I dare say that what she did was exponentially more difficult, but equally as respected.
Oh yeah, definitely that. And we mentioned Rough House, founded by Chris Schwartz. Rough House, a label that I feel doesn't really get enough credit. And I think they had a helping hand on putting out the Fugees' Blunted from Reality album, if it serves me correctly, I think.
From what I understand, there are unreleased masters from the Fugees there as well, over at Rough House. I could be wrong, but from rumor has it, as well as recordings. Do you remember Criss Cross?
Of course.
Yeah,
Who cannot forget Criss Cross?
Exactly. Well, they were from Philly, and they were actually signed to Rough House at the time. And they were Philly's, Rough House was Philly's version of, say, Rowdy Records over there. Rowdy at the time in Atlanta had Monica. You know what I'm saying? Like they were trying to be like a smaller, the same way that let's say you had Philly International and Sigma Sound, and you had Rough House. They were kind of like the urban answer. But the thing is, again, just from my personal opinion, I hope things have changed. But during that time, again, Philly was the place that you come from, not go to. And people were trying to change that. We're still trying to change that. Like, to me, Philly has got such a great vibe. But when it comes to the music industry, because there's not a really, since there's been a vacuum left by the likes of Gamble and Huff, that can't be filled by inexperienced people. So unless you're going to do, like there are artists who are like in different genres of hip hop who are funded by drug money. That's not a new thing. But unless you're going to go that route, there's not a Motown anymore. There's not a Philly International anymore. And Rough House was potentially, like you said, they had the potential to be that outlet. And I didn't work for them or with them directly enough to really speak on why it didn't succeed. But in general, there's been this quote unquote curse on Philadelphia. And I think a lot of it has to do with a crabs in a barrel mentality. If you ain't, no offense to anybody who worked at Rough House, because I'm sure they tried their best and I would love to hear their side of the story. But in general, a lot of these Philly companies failed because of that crabs in a barrel mentality where, like, if you ain't never been nowhere, you can't take somebody somewhere that you've never been. So you kind of need to reach out and work with people outside of your sphere of influence. And a lot of people aren't willing to share the pie. People get greedy. And then if you're from where I'm from, the minute something don't look right and you're doing that double talk, we fighting.
Right.
So
which is
difficult to keep the artists in line and keep the business people in line when everybody is from the street.
Right. Right, which is the one good thing that I always appreciated about Atlanta. To me, the Atlanta music scene was like a buffet table. Everybody sitting down at the table. LA, Babyface, TLC, Organized Noise, Dallas, Monica. So, hey, I got this. Let me pass it to you and we can share.
Well, I love that because we had a lot of fun on Peachtree. Even though we recorded the albums in LA, we would come out to Peachtree Road and there was an office for LaFace, and then we'd go to Hitco and we used to kick it with Pink. Shout out to Alicia Moore. Who was another, I'll say Pennsylvania, Philadelphia native. She claims Philadelphia, but it's more like Philadelphia County. But whatever, she's from my neck of the woods. And that being said, we used to kick it a lot. And the thing about Atlanta is, yes, Atlanta has a specific flavor. But if you don't like, say, cinnamon, it's not for you. If you don't like the flavor, you don't There is nothing else on the menu. So if you don't understand, say, Goody Mob or Society of Soul or Dallas Austin, TLC, Tony Braxton, like there's a lot of artists that created the Atlanta sound, and it's very distinct and unique. So the thing is, with As Yet, I think that nobody would have associated us with the Atlanta sound. So as much as we loved it, we never quite fit in there. No, Atlanta never claimed us, even though our parent company and LaFace was founded in Atlanta. We never got hate from Atlanta. We performed there a lot. Matter of fact, a fight broke out when we performed at Atlanta Hawks game. A fight broke out. We were performing with Monica and Brandy. Oh man, and a fight broke out in the crowd, in the audience. They were pulling shirts over each other's heads and fist fighting.
Oh man. Crazy. Now, since we're on the subject of Atlanta, you got to tell me the story of what you told me about Pink, about how she got to deal with LaFace.
Okay, so Alicia Moore, aka Pink. Alicia Moore was in a group called Choice, and it was a girl group. If I remember correctly, there were 3 of them, and this was around the time, by the way, when Fergie was in a group called Wild Orchid. That's a whole other conversation.
They were signed to RCA.
Yeah, so he knows what's up. So I'm saying, I'm not called the right dude. So basically, Choice was our label mates. And because LaFace only put out a couple acts a year, they would hold this event. They flew all their artists out to the Bahamas. Now, this is awesome. It was As Yet, A Few Good Men, Tony Braxton, TLC, Choice, Tony Rich, Donnell Jones, Usher. I'm probably leaving people out, but Goody Mob, you name it. Anybody, Society of Soul,
Outkast.
Well, Outkast was that's right. They were still Outkast. It was before Big Boy and Andre went and did their Love Below Speaker Box album. Okay, yeah, you're right. So they were there, right? All of us were kicking it. I'm talking like almost all the artists, including myself. We all smoked weed together, just kicking it and talking, right? And the talk amongst the label, all the artists were like, hey man, you know that this is not a party. This is an audition. Yeah, we're all signed right now, but they can only put out 1 or 2 artists next year. So it's a competition and somebody's on the chopping block. The word got out, right? So basically when Choice performed, Choice was the group that Alicia Moore, aka Pink, was singing in. Now, the girls performed. I was there. I watched them. But when it came time for Pink to do her verse, she bursted out and jumped on top of the monitor and was like going balls to the wall. She stood out as far as her level of extrovertedness and her forward, aggressive performance. I never got the impression from talking to her that she wanted to leave the group. However, the label decided at that point she's the only one worth keeping. Now, I don't know who these other 2 girls are, and it's probably unfair to them that they weren't kept because it's not my decision. However, when that first record came out, There You Go, with Pink, she fought tooth and nail to write her own music. This, like from our earlier conversation when we were talking about how the labels want you to just kind of fall in line and use their people.
Mm-hmm.
She was one of the few that fought for her own direction. And the thing is, I remember having this conversation with her where she's like, look, you got to tell these people, if this is what you want to do, you just tell them. And I'm like, maybe you can get away with that. But we couldn't, because when you're in a group, you have to have a united front and you got to be ready to walk away. When you're a girl, you can talk to dudes a certain way and they think it's cute. But if I talk to you that same way, it ain't cute. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
When a woman stands up for herself and she gets in your face, it gives you have more respect for her for being a strong woman. But when a dude gets up in your face, I'm punching you in your face.
Right. Which makes what Pink has done since she left LaFace and hooked up with Linda Perry from Four Non Blondes and rebranded herself as a rock pop outfit, a whole ton of respect. Now, being down in Atlanta, did you ever cross paths with JD, So So Def, Little John, and anybody that was in the So So Def camp?
Okay. Okay. JD, yes. Look, before and during Janet Jackson and DeBrat. So that's okay. Um, I don't have anything against them per se, but I think that because they weren't directly affiliated with Hitco, which was LaFace's in-house writing team, they're the ones that had. Shout out, by the way, to KP, Big KP, Kawan Prather.
TTI's guy.
That's the dude. Basically, he was the lead A&R / head creative over there at LaFace in Atlanta. So he was one of the cats that was in our corner from the beginning. So I just wanted to give him a shout out because they were trying to get us with a lot of hit co-writers. And the thing is, I don't have any problems with nobody at this point. But you know, when you're young, you're trying to prove yourself and trying to do everything. It's like, for whatever reason, because we were Babyface's artists and we're signed to the West Coast, we could never really collaborate the way we wanted to with the Atlanta artists because they didn't understand. Okay, let's just say we didn't understand each other, but I will say that they didn't know what to do with us because you and I both know the Atlanta sound. None of it that I know of is known for having 5-part harmonies. There may be a segment somewhere, but it's not something you think of first. So there's no offense to them, but we just didn't fit in being from Philly and then going to California and working with Babyface and then coming to Atlanta. It was just like maybe
geographically the sound didn't fit because Atlanta sound to me was a derivative of what was going on further south in Florida with Luke and Miami Bass.
Yes. You hit the nail on the head. And that's the thing. It's no disrespect whatsoever. It's just certain things just don't go together. It's like, you know, you have to kind of commit to a cream sauce or a tomato sauce. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just can't put, I mean, I'm going to say this, but maybe you'll try it. Cinnamon and fried chicken. Maybe you like it, but I don't think of that first. That's not the first thing I think of putting on my fried chicken is no cinnamon. So maybe it'll taste good. But the point is nobody ever gave us like that kind of attention in Atlanta because they were like, oh, y'all not from this vibe right here, so y'all don't understand what we're doing, and the feeling is mutual, so we just hung out and had more fun. So we did the same choice. They picked Pink. She came out. She left. We got picked. Few Good Men. Shout out to Few Good Men. You know, we competed for our slot as the group. It was either us or Few Good Men, and history will show that they put our music out. Few Good Men did have a song or two out, but they didn't get the love that we got. We thought we weren't getting love until we heard how they got treated. So, shout out to Few Good Men.
Yeah, because
I just mean they didn't get the treatment.
Yeah, because I feel like their Let's Take a Dip album, which Let's Take a Dip was originally done by Dallas Austin's short-lived group, Highland Place Marsters, and a big shout-out goes to Joyce Cinderella Irby from Climax. She was the one that brought Dallas Austin into the game, helped him do I'll Always Love You and My Music off of Troop's Attitude album, which also led to her discovering Sammy and Lloyd.
Yes. And great contributions to the era, for sure. Those are well-deserved shout-outs.
Well, definitely well-deserved. And you mentioned 112 earlier. Did you cross paths with any of the hitmen from Bad Boy like D-Dot, Harv Pierre, Tony Dofat, Ron Amin-Ra, Lawrence, Mario Winans, a lot of those guys, Jack Knight?
Okay, Mario Winans, yes. And Harvey, okay, you ever heard of Harvey Mason?
Yeah, from the Underdogs.
Yeah, we work with them. We worked with, shout out to Tim and Bob. You hip to Tim and Bob. You hip to, I mentioned Warren Campbell, but what about Mike City? Mike City's another tight cat. We worked with Eric Dawkins. We worked with, oh man, so many artists, so many people. Did you
work with Keith Crouch, who did work on Brandy's debut album?
Keith Crouch and Kenneth Crouch. Both of them, they're both talented bad cats right there. And Brandy, I got to tell you Brandy's story. All right, real quick. Brandy, if you're listening, you know, I'm sorry. But rumor has it, the word around town, this is back in the day. When I say back in the day, around the same time that Brandy was dating Wanye and she went to the prom with Kobe, her
Rest in peace,
momager,
Kobe.
yes, rest in power. Around that time, there was a call put out to me from my momager. We call it momager because she was Babyface's mother-in-law. She was talking to Sonia Norwood, and the idea was floated to me about possibly dating or being seen with Brandy romantically linked in Hollywood terms. And the thing was, right, she's beautiful and talented, and there's no reason why I would say no. But because of where I was and the space that I was in mentally, my first response was, I ain't doing no Hollywood shit. Like, I don't even know her like that. How am I going to say yes to being romantically involved with somebody I'm not even like friends with like that? Like, I see her everywhere and she's cool, but I wasn't thirsty. Like I just wasn't built like that to be like, oh, I'm going to be with somebody for the clout. You know what I'm saying? But it was floated to me. Looking back on it, right? I mean, she's beautiful. I'm sure things would have worked out and she's a great person, and I should have at least sat down and met with her, right? But again, just the whole premise behind using something to me that's sacred, like a relationship, a personal relationship, is a sacred thing. It's not something that you just do for publicity. So,
Right.
But at the time, like, and I was like, wait, she just was at the prom with Kobe and she was dating Wanye. You know, looking back on it, I mean, it's really like at this point, would it really have made a difference? I don't know. I mean, I don't have any regrets. It's just, I feel like it's not her fault. Like if she was genuinely interested in me at the time and the management may have spun it to make it seem like a publicity stunt, I don't know. But, you know, I still have feelings for her as a human being, as a talented, beautiful woman. You know, so that's about it. Like, I don't know her well enough to make any life decisions like that.
Right. And you mentioned earlier, Barrio Boys, and I feel that they were completely underrated. The How We Roll album, it should have came out, I think, 97, 98, right around when Ricky Martin and Enrique was breaking here in the U.S. And also, too, they were signed to the wrong label. They were signed to the SBK, which was known for Vanilla Ice, and Riff was signed onto SBK Records. For those of you that don't know Riff, look at the movie Lean on Me, bathroom scene. That's all you need to know.
Right. Speaking of Lean on Me, rest in power, Bill Withers once again. That's twice he got a reference today. in a roundabout way. But yes.
Right.
And the thing is with Barrio Boys, right? I mean, I love them because of what they represent for the culture and just the idea of blending and merging. And I think in their minds they went to the right label because they were able to make an artist who wasn't supposed to succeed, quote unquote, racially, succeed, which was Vanilla Ice. As much as we might revile him,
Vanilla Ice was dope. I mean, dancing and hooked on to the extreme, dope record. But I just think the backlash of him coming after Hammer and then with New Kids exploding, feeling like, oh, you're just taking black culture and just whitewashing it, making it pop.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. But the point I'm trying to make is when you are trying to break into a market that you're unfamiliar with, I can imagine how the label pitched themselves. They said, look, if we can make this guy Vanilla Ice a success, imagine what we can do for you. That's probably how they pitched it, to where they signed with the wrong label because it seemed like a good idea at the time. That's all I was trying to say. I'm in no way ever going to defend Vanilla Ice. I don't know him well enough to defend him. But I'm just saying, like, you know, I can see how they might have thought, well, if they can make him blow up, then maybe they can help me out.
Right, cause I also mentioned to you earlier off air, about Néstor Velasquez. He was signed to Uptown back in the early 90s, had a single personality. Go to YouTube to check out my interview with him. He was saying that song took off, but it was right around during the fourth quarter of the year when the labels would break for the holidays. And once they came back at the top of the year, there was really nobody to push the record. And then also he was originally supposed to have been a member of the Barrio Boys, according to, once again, my interview with Joe Jacket. And Néstor confirmed that he was originally supposed to have been in Barrio Boys.
Yep. And the thing is, with Barrio Boys, they had a few different deals. Well, from what I understand, you know, they had issues with certain members and replacement members, and that's how we got Miguel Bermudez. He's in Viva Mas, which is the group that I'm in now, and they brought him in to replace somebody, and the consummate, Miguel is a consummate professional. He actually, to me, he sounds like a Puerto Rican Teddy Pendergrass, man. Like he got that hazy, heavy, like, type soulful voice. And the thing was, I don't think the market, this kind of goes to what we spoke about earlier, the labels don't know how to market you unless you fit into a certain slot. So what they'll do is they'll say, oh, you're Puerto Rican? What's the most popular style of Puerto Rican music? Okay, you're doing that. As opposed to like, how can you push the boundaries of what it means to be Puerto Rican? What do you guys like? Let's incorporate that and hire some new people. The same way that like other artists do, where they'll take you to the next level by pairing you up with the right producer like a Rick Rubin or like a Timbaland or like a Babyface. Where like you bring your style to them and they take it to the next level. But with certain types of artists, they say, oh, well, we're going to pigeonhole you because that's the only way we know how to make our money. So regardless of what label that Barrio Boys went to, it would really depend on how much creative input and freedom they have to see whether or not the music would stand the test of time to go further than just being like part of that 5-year trend or whatever.
Right. And same way, because same way about Bobby Ross Avila when he was an artist. I mean, La La Love and My Love, the work he did on the My Destiny album with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, I felt like had they would have gotten a stranglehold of, okay, this demographic is going to be big. Let's take the Latin flavor and put the R&B with it. He would have been huge. And I felt C-Note, the boy group that was on Transcon, they released A Different Kind of Love, Wait Till I Get Home, Covered I Like. I thought they would have been the next group out of that camp to really blow.
You want to hear something deep? Now you're talking about being on the wrong label. Transcontinental.
And I interviewed Donna Wright, and this was before everything unraveled with Lou and everything like that. So I know the story all too well.
Yeah, so those of you who don't know the story, I'm not going to retell it here. I'm just going to say that Transcontinental succeeded as much because of and in spite of their imprisoned and recently deceased CEO. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Like some things need no explaining.
Yeah, go watch the boy band Con. It was on Lance's documentary. It had him, some of the NSYNC and Backstreet guys, Donna, right? And they talk about everything. And then another group who I felt they were urban, and then once new label head switched, they went pop. But I felt they found their sweet spot as an urban group. 98 Degrees. Go online, check out my interview with Jeff Timmons, because they pretty much were.
Wow.
Because they pretty much were patterning their first album after groups like Boyz II Men, Shy, you guys. I mean, straight R&B.
Well, it's funny because they never really got my attention until they crossed over, but only because I guess at that point we were too busy. Well, look, we were too busy not taking any of our competition that serious to think of them as competition. You know what I'm saying? Because it was a smaller group and they were doing they had a niche. I agree with you. But I never really, it's almost like imagine if Pink had stayed urban and didn't cross over, maybe she would have still been doing urban now. Maybe 98 Degrees would still be doing urban now. But to think as history has dictated, can you imagine 98 Degrees being more urban than Justin Timberlake? And Justin Timberlake, you would never think of in the beginning from Disney going straight up urban. Even though there are clips of him doing Jamaican-ish sort of weird stuff. If you look at some of these videos of him back in the day, there's a video of him with Leonardo DiCaprio singing. I'm gonna find this clip and send it to you. But there's a clip of them doing some kind of Rastafarian remix on Disney Channel. I was like, this has got to be a joke.
Oh yeah, but once again, you got to think about where Justin is from. Justin's from Memphis, Stax. He's well rooted in R&B, so it's in his blood.
True, and you can't hate on that. You know what I'm saying? Well,
I'm not gonna hate. Right, and then we also mentioned earlier how if JC would have gone the Robin Thicke route, I felt he would have been bigger as a solo artist, to me.
I think so too, because he had the chops, he had the instrument, but just not the song. And the industry was so hard on him, unfairly, if you ask me. For somebody who's coming from such a successful situation, you don't give up after one single that was on a soundtrack. You take that and you work with it, because you've got pre-existing fans, nothing else to do if the group is already moved on at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything, the internet teaches is that controversy sells, and that it's better to have engagement, and it's better to be vehemently disliked than to not be known of at all. So if somebody's hating on you, but they're commenting and you're getting all this engagement, then guess what? Hollywood loves a good comeback. The world loves a good comeback. Like, they will, if you do something right, they'll uncancel you as long as you're not like racist or like doing something ridiculous like child molestation or something weird. You can pretty much come back from anything. So they should have given them another chance. I think they should have at least put out a ballad after that failed up-tempo or a remix or something. Make people the same way they do it with new artists that don't have a following. Invest. Make them like you.
Right.
Or you can go ahead and sign 10 new artists for the same money, and then hopefully one of them will stick. And you basically throwing away everybody else's life. The other 9 artists and their families got stars.
Right. And we were speaking about 3T earlier. Now, I'm still puzzled as to why they didn't have the same success overseas in Europe and America. I mean, you're from the family that shaped our lives in pop culture, the Jacksons. So why do you think 3T didn't really take off here in America?
Ooh, I have really strong feelings about this, and we never discussed this before, but for me, right, just personally, and I don't represent the general public. These are not the opinions of the radio station, but I think the bar is set way too high. If you come from that family and you're the younger generation, if you're not as good, if not better, the Jackson 5 played instruments. They had a TV show, cartoons. They not only produced group records, but they had more than one solo artist who was successful. They were musicians. But when I saw 3T, I was like, there's no standout person. They sound timid, and the harmony is nice. Like, they don't suck. Like, I'm not saying they're not talented, but there was nothing about them that added to the legacy of what the Jacksons were about. Like, if they had come out doing a totally different style than the Jacksons, or one of them had a bass voice, and it was like, whoa, that's not something we expect from the Jacksons, or they could really dance their asses off and sounded half as good, like B2K. No offense, but B2K, is not the Jackson 5, but they could dance their asses off, and they had their own thing. There was nothing new being brought to the table, in my opinion, and I'm sorry, 3T, please don't blackball me. I love you guys. You can tell me how much I suck in person, and how whack I am as an artist and a producer, and I'm not saying that they're whack. I'm just saying that for me, I was expecting more, because when you grow up in a legacy that's already been established, you got to add. You got to add something that hasn't already been there. And honestly, ask yourself this, listening public, ask yourself, if 3T never came out, what would you miss? There you go. I'm sorry, somebody had to get thrown under the bus tonight. You can delete this later, but that's
right, because
I think the public might have been a little underwhelmed.
Because I'm a huge fan of 3T. I love the Brotherhood album, Sexual Attention, which was co-written by Robin Thicke, and also felt that another group from over in the UK that was huge, that should have blown up more in the US, was 5. They had moderate success here in the States, but they just didn't really have that breakout single that would have bust them over big time in America. And that was created by Mr. Simon Cowell in response to Missing Out on the Spice Girls, which was created by Mr. Simon Fuller.
Exactly. And you bring up a point that I probably should have mentioned earlier, that sometimes, most of the time, the artist's talent exceeds the songs they get. Kind of like what we talked about with JC. And with 3T, I like the material, and I'm not saying that they're bad. It's just unfair that they're in such a huge shadow with that family, that unless you're doing something so extremely different or adding a new dimension, people are going to always look at you as, a 3-part version of the Jackson 5 that don't play instruments. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, people are going to unfairly pigeonhole you. You know what I'm saying? That's why I said this is not the radio station thing. But going back to your point about, 5. I'm a sucker for 5-part harmony. You don't call yourself 5 unless at least some point in the group you're going to put 5 parts. And I don't mean 2 octaves and a 3-part. I mean 5
individual notes in a chord. To me, that just makes sense. It's like calling yourself Take Six, but you're only singing 3/4 harmony and 2 basses and 2 top notes or some weird, you know what I mean? Like, it's just not right. So, I don't know, like, I'm biased because of my musical background, but sometimes I think that the listening public is wiser than we give them credit for, and people try to dumb the music down when they don't need to. They need to just play it one extra time. You know, like they used to tell, this is completely off the cuff, they used to tell people, you know, songs are supposed to be 3 minutes and 30 seconds, you know. Queen released a song called Bohemian Rhapsody that is a classic. It's like 7 minutes long. Radio didn't want to play it. You know, I'm sure by now people have seen the movie, and some of it is fairly accurate. But what people don't tell you is that the first label that turned them down eventually signed them, like after they got turned down by everybody else, because they just kept plugging away. You know, like they don't tell you the struggle. And the thing is, people are capable of enjoying any style of music if it's presented in the right way. If you're busy watching TV and I unplug it during your favorite show and say, listen to this, you're not going to want to listen to it. If you're surfing on YouTube and you're looking for a Jay-Z song and there's a commercial for Boyz II Men, you're like, I didn't come here for that. I'm going to click past it. It's about when you reach people. So I think a lot of these great talented actors, even 3T, if 3T had come out not during the group time, when people were missing groups, people would have really appreciated what they had to offer. People would say, oh, wow, you know what? If they would have come out after Michael passed and after all the smoke blew, you know, once all the smoke cleared, I think they would have gotten the attention they deserved, as well as these groups like, you know, from Europe and Five. It's all about the timing. Like, can you imagine if Adele came out right after, what do you call it, Rehab? But, you know what I'm saying? Can you imagine trying to follow up? It would just be overload. It would be overload.
Right. It's all about
singing artists and imagine Josh Stone coming out at the same time as Adele. It would just be like kind of weird. Right?
Oh yeah, Duffy too. Because I thought Duffy was really gonna blow here, but like you said, Adele just came out and just whoop, out the water. And then when I listened to Freddie Mercury's voice, I'm like, if he would have toned like the Broadway style of his voice, he could have did the whole George Michael Faith album.
Right.
To me.
Right. And Adam Lambert can sing both of their albums. It's funny. I used to sing George Michael. As a matter of fact, when I came back to Philly, right, there's this little karaoke spot. I say little, but it's like 3 stories, called Yakitori Boys downtown. Shout out to Yakitori Boys, right? They got like a karaoke upstairs with like a big stage and like a huge screen and an open bar. You just go and chill. And I had just been through a bitter divorce, and I'm looking through the song list. At the last minute, I changed my selection. I said, I want to sing George Michael, Kissing a Fool. Man, the room got so quiet, and I had to turn and face the audience, even though I was just chilling by the bar, because it was that intense. Like, his songs have so much impact on people that no matter when you put it on, it, you know, stops people in their tracks. Right. To me, that's what music is all about. Like, it takes you to a place that you could not otherwise reach.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
right, because
went off on another tangent.
Oh no. Because Kissing a Fool, one of my favorite cuts off of Faith has that jazzy Michael Bublé sound, and like I stated earlier, it was the first album by a white artist to go #1 on R&B. I mean, he was getting airplay on R&B radio alongside Luther, Michael Jackson, Anita Baker, or whatever big artist of the day.
He didn't take the Vanilla Ice route. He didn't change his swag. He's wearing short shorts. Talking about face to face. Right. And then I'm going to give you. Love him ahead of you.
Right. And since we're on the subject of Blue Eyed Soul, and this group was a label mate of his on Columbia, I'm going to give you in the listening public a little bit of backstory about New Kids on the Block and Please Don't Go Girl. All right. So there was 2 versions of the Please Don't Go Girl video. One of them, they were in an auditorium, and it was low budget. So what ended up happening with that was when I interviewed Danny Wood, go to youtube.com, check that out. He said that Maurice Starr, go to YouTube, check that out, paid for it out of pocket and they shot that video specifically for BET because New Kids on the Block at that time was being marketed as an R&B group. And what happened was a pop station out of Florida started playing it. I guess the person must have saw the video on BET, and that's how the song started to gain some pop traction. Then once MTV got a hold of these guys, once all the top 40 stations said, hey, you got a hit here to Columbia, and Donnie Einer and Larkin Arnold, who is legendary in the music business as far as for urban music, and they shot the better version of Please Don't Go Girl, which was the one at Coney Island.
Ah, interestingly enough, right, from a musical perspective, Please Don't Go Girl is the same template as Is This the End? Run them, if you ran them back to back, please don't go, girl, is this the end? Are you my friend? It's the same song. And I remember, you were talking about Maurice Starr. He had to go on Arsenio Hall, right? You remember this? When they interviewed him and said, there's a rumor going around that your vocals are actually on this record and that you are a master imitator of other artists. And he went on there and was singing all these different people. Man, look that up. It blows your mind. A lot of people give Maurice Starr the credit for being the Svengali who filled in the gaps on a lot of these groups. And the thing is, I believe it to a certain extent because the same thing happened even with Boyz II Men. Boyz II Men, they sang all their vocals on Motown Philly, and they're on every record they ever sang. They're not Milli Vanilli. But when you listen to that Boyz II Men Christmas album, Brian McKnight, he told me himself that As Yet was the only group he ever wrote for that he didn't sing backgrounds on the record, including Boyz II Men. So when you listen to the reason why the Boyz II Men Christmas album, one of the reasons why it sounds so great is because Boyz II Men delivered great performances. Another reason why it sounds so great is because Brian McKnight layered harmony behind them to thicken it up and give it the color notes and the thickness that you can't get from just 3/4 harmony plus a bass. That being said, Maurice Starr was a pioneer of that as well. So there's also a guy named Tony Thompson. Do you remember High Five? I have a real good friend of mine. Shout out to my girl Angela. That knew Tony very well, and so I know of High Five. Tony, underrated singer. That Sexational album, man, Sweat. I mean, you had Devontae, I'll Be Sure. I mean, Diddy was on that album. If I personally feel had Tony, got himself straight, Tony should have been bigger as a solo artist. Well, here's a story that I didn't get to share with you. As Yet has a connection to High Five. There's a cat from Philly named Damon Keith Miley. Now, no, I'm sorry, that's Damon Miley. Damon Keith Williams is a whole other cat. Damon Miley used to sing the demos for all of High Five songs. He was actually the cat. He had that Tony Thompson voice, but a more, I'll say, wider range, a more theatrical version. He just didn't have that look that they were looking for, and he's a little bit older. But he's a great songwriter, great producer, and unfortunately, he never got his shine. But he would go back and forth to New York. And the way that As Yet Untitled got to perform at the Apollo was because he lives in Harlem. Dan Miley, he lives in Harlem in this place that is falling apart to where, your place is falling apart when only one person can get on the staircase at a time so it don't fall. It was a condemned building.
Oh, wow.
So we were staying there just long enough so that we can perform as amateurs at the Apollo. And Damon Miley. There's another cat, by the way. I keep saying his name because there's a cat that's like the Teddy Pendergrass of Philadelphia named Damon Keith Williams who would perform at all these concerts, and I don't know why he didn't blow up. But the point that I'm trying to make is that if you listen to Never Should Have Let You Go by High Five, the backgrounds and the harmony were filled in by Damon Miley. And there's a cat from As Yet named LaDon, a.k.a. Donald Smith, LaDon Bishop, who used to sing demos for Joe. So if you have ever heard the song by As Yet called Every Woman, that was one of the lead vocalists who replaced Mark was named LaDon Bishop, a.k.a. Donald Smith, and he turned out to be a teacher at my daughter's school. That's how the world turns around. He was one of the most beloved teachers at my daughter's private school. But to make a long story short, you never know how many people sacrifice their talent so that someone else can get all the glory, and it's unfortunate.
Right.
I mean, it's a beautiful thing, but it's unfortunate.
Right. And another group that I felt they were, for me, these guys were my number 2 group right behind New Edition. Them boys out of Pasadena, California, Troop.
Oh, man. Are you kidding me? Troop is like one of my all-time favorites to this day. Shout out to Stephen Russell. You know, shout out to the whole group. And the thing is, Troop was right at that threshold where they were crossover, but they weren't pop in the bubblegum sense. They were R&B, but they weren't urban in that guttural sense, like, you know what I'm saying? But they had just, to me, a natural balance in their music that was not contrived. And the artist that is Troop claimed responsibility for their creative direction, which is something I always admire about them and any group that's trying to make it, or any artist, when you contribute and participate and direct your vision, it's not easy to do. In any era, it's difficult because you're always being doubted. There's always someone else who's paying the money who thinks everything should go their way. There's always something. You know what I mean? It's just the way it is. Right.
Definitely a big shout out to Alan, Steve, and John, who I had the pleasure of interviewing on 3 separate occasions. Definitely Alan, because Alan was my first ever interview. So definitely big shout outs to Troop. And I feel that for me, personally, I think New Edition set a high bar as far as groups goes. They are still the gold standard for any group. Like, hey, you want to get to this level? This is who you look up to, because all 6 of them had solo success outside of the group, can break off and come back together at any time. You know, and tell me what other group has done that.
I'm gonna, okay. No other group. All right, I'll put it like this, right? There are multiple metrics one can look to define success, and by any measure, New Edition are legends. On the flip side, or I'll say another facet of this jewel of R&B, the metric that I like to use is who can sing each other's material. I'll give you an example, right? People say, oh, well, you know, Ashanti sold more records than Kim Burrell. But would you rather hear Ashanti sing Kim Burrell songs or Kim Burrell sing Ashanti songs? Would you rather hear Mariah Carey sing Kim Cole songs or Kim Cole sing Mariah? Like, when you flip them around, it's like, it's a whole nother metric. I'm not saying it's the only one, but just imagine. It's a fun game to play. Imagine, for instance, right? Boyz II Men singing As Yet songs, As Yet singing Boyz II Men songs. Imagine Troop singing New Edition songs, New Edition singing Troop songs. Like, this can go on. This is a game you could play all day. And it kind of equals out in a different way. And you can't really do it with hip-hop artists because it's very rare that hip-hop artists cover a full song from another hip-hop artist. It would just be like weird because, you know, it's just not in the culture. I'm not saying it's impossible because there was actually a Rapper's Delight remix that I thought was really cool. You know, it was like redone by a bunch of different artists and it was dope. But the thing I'm trying to say is that after you strip away the successes, because I'm aware of the politics, and it's a different kind of genius to be able to pull it off, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the musical merits as a standalone thing. For instance, right, Luther Vandross, God rest his soul, versus R. Kelly, right? I mean, R. Kelly versus Charlie Wilson. Hey, R. Kelly may have sold more records than Charlie Wilson, but Charlie Wilson will sing circles around R. Kelly in his prison cell. So it just depends on what metric you're using, and the comparisons can go on indefinitely.
Yeah, definitely. Another singer, you were mentioning R&B singers, Lilo Thomas, underrated male R&B singer, signed to the same management company with Freddie Jackson, Melba Moore, Paul Lawrence over at Hush.
Oh man, Hush! You taking me back with Hush, And okay, well, I say shout out to Lilo Thomas. That's one of those things, man, where I don't really know what what it is that people are doing or not doing. And sometimes you can do everything right, and it's just not supposed to be for you at that moment. And it's unfortunate because to me, one of the biggest tragedies is watching people who are way more talented than I'll ever be not get the shine they deserve. I just want to pull my hair out. And the thing is, there's enough people in the world. It's not like that. I mean, I want to see everybody win. Like, I just do. When I say I want to see everybody win, I don't mean I want to see like rapists and child molesters and criminals like win, but I'm just saying that like there is a lot of unappreciated talent, and I've never met Lilo personally enough. I shake his hand when I see him in the street. He ain't never done nothing to me, so I have nothing bad to say about him. It's unfortunate like that. It's how this game is. The worst part for me is when you do succeed, it cripples you. How about that? Because they'll say, "Oh, well, when's the next?" They still ask me when the next As Yet record's coming out. I'm like, I ain't been in the group in like 7 years, right? Like I could tell you when it's coming out, but I'm not in the group no more.
Right. So looking back on As Yet, do you feel that the group has gotten this just due amongst the many R&B groups that came out in the 90s, and then also talk about your fan base overseas, as we discussed previously, I believe, over in Malaysia?
Oh, okay. Now, I honestly have to say that I think that As Yet got its just due amongst those who know, meaning people who judged or critiqued our music for music's sake, who weren't overwhelmed by the hype and did not strictly look at record sales, but listened to the sound of the record for what it was, appreciate it fully. Those are the people who showed up. And when you mention overseas, I feel like there's a reason why many groups, not just As Yet, were appreciated overseas, because they look to the United States to set the tone musically for whatever reason. The same way that we might look to China for technology, or look, I don't know, when I think of like soulful music, I'm going to listen to gospel. I'm not going to, no offense to any other style of music, but it's not like I'm going to go to, Brazil to hear reggaeton. They've got their own samba. I don't, what I'm saying? That being said, I think we should, I say woulda, shoulda, coulda. It's just a weird place to exist because I'm like personally not of that belief. I think everything is as it should have been, because if it had been any different, we would be having a different conversation. But that being said, I appreciate everybody who loved what we did. I think the group could have went further. Woulda, shoulda, coulda. Yes, we could have gone further. And yes, some of the records that we recorded that weren't released were just as good and better than the ones that got released. As far as, when I say better, I mean musically, sonically, spiritually, like where we were at the time, like how certain artists get to develop over time. When you've got 200 and 300 songs under your belt, you're a different artist than when you're on your first album. You just are, period. But that being said, I'm at a place in my life personally where everything I do, I have to answer to my kids and my future grandkids, because I realize how temporary all of this is and how fragile life is and how much more there is to life than just being famous and money. Although those things are great, they can be a byproduct of your success or a measure of your success, or they can be, they can be a barrier to happiness. It's however you look at things. So for me, I want to contribute to the world or not do it at all. It's either going to be something great that puts a smile on one extra person's face. I'm not going to get in the studio thinking, man, how many views is this going to get, or what market are we aiming for, and all that. Now, you know what? I'll leave that to the marketers. I just want to get in and do and create and be authentic and reflect the times and be socially responsible and uplift and enlighten and provide opportunities when possible.
Right. And do you have anything else that you want to say before we close out the interview?
Yes, sir. Today is a very auspicious day. Today marks both the anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King and the beloved Dr. Maya Angelou. I have a single that I produced with Smooch Music, which is available today. By the time you listen to this, it will have been out since April 4th. It is a single called Human Family, written and performed by the legendary Dr. Maya Angelou, God rest her soul, produced by yours truly, available on all platforms. Human Family 2020, Dr. Maya Angelou.
All right. And give out your social media handles.
Shawn Kurt Rivera on Instagram. That's ShawnKurtRivera on Instagram. And Shawn Rivera, there's only one of me that looks like me, the same guy who drank your wine. You can find me on Facebook. I'm out there. I'm also on Reverb Nation. You can look me up on iTunes or on YouTube. One way or another, all roads lead to me.
All right. And this interview will be heard on Anchor, this outlet, Spotify, and other podcast outlets. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, Mr. Shawn Rivera from the 90s R&B group Asher. Shawn, thank you for doing this interview with me, my man.
Thank you.
Thank you.